with men, you have a minor disagreement on doctrine, like, oh, I can't work with this guy. He has this minor disagreement on doctrine or whatever, or he's part of another religion or blah blah blah. And so we're hurting ourselves by doing that. And you don't have to be biblical to understand that patriarchy is the design. So
psychology for a long time now is young girls' tendency to try and orchestrate fairness, but they only do it where it will give them some kind of an advantage. So they're not actually out to make it fair for everybody. They're just out to get something for themselves and using fairness as a way to achieve that.
I know my dad did justice, and all my brothers are beta too. They all have a traditional provision relationship. So it's really important for men like you and I to teach other men this, because this is lost art now.
The women online behave very much like terrorists, and so people don't want to breach the topic. So if you're not addressing the problem in order to avoid the female e-girl terrorists, then you're benefiting from it.
All right, welcome everybody. We're Joel and Lior, and today we're having a conversation with a special guest, Bradley Vasquez from Altarnate Media. Would you like to introduce yourself, Brad?
Oh, yeah. Well, you did beautifully. Bradley Vasquez from Altarnate Media, co-founder and president. Our main mission has been to reintroduce exactly, how Jewish the New Testament is and how Jewish the figure of Yeshua is to Christianity. But as part of that comes with, speaking about marriage dynamics and what are biblical marriage dynamics. So this is a conversation that is very near and dear to me, and I'm very passionate about. So I'm very grateful to be having this conversation with you too.
Yeah, absolutely. We've known about Bradley for a long time, going back 4.5 years. We heard about him first through John Lawson's channel, Kingdom Seekers, and so we've been looking forward to this for a while. So glad we finally got to collab. And we're noticing the same things. Feminism is a cancer that permeates all ideologies, everything Christianity, Torah, Messianic Judaism, Islam, sometimes, ironically, atheism. So it's a whole religion in and of itself.
Yes.
I used to be a part of a lot of these groups too. And Bradley came across a post that, how it says Eve's a helpmate to Adam. God created Eve to be a helpmate in the Bible, and everyone for 6,000 years interpreted that as a helper, as a subordinate helper, a helpmate, not equal to, not above, so there's been all kinds of, because we've had 100 years of feminism, women always want to empower themselves, just like the garden, just like Satan, complete usurpation. And so now they're redefining what that obvious word means. And the ironic part is you don't even have to be biblical to understand the design. God, man, woman, child, the stronger is above, the weaker is below. And it's a mutually beneficial relationship. The person above has the authority, but they actually, provide a lot of benefits for the person below, and the person below submits to the person above and helps them, in whatever and never lesser capacity possible. So, but now they're interpreting it as maybe the Hebrew word helper, sometimes Yah is called a helper. And so maybe the woman's actually superior to the man. She's helping him because he needs help because he's just so inferior, So he's part of one of those Torah feminist groups on Facebook, and
they don't call themselves feminist groups. They're just saying that they're messianic or they're Torah.
Right.
And they're mostly inhabited by women. You'll notice that it's mostly women in the groups. Mm-hmm. I've kind of stepped back from these groups, and I think Joel has as well. So
this problem's so bad. We thought we'd find common ground with other biblical people on it, but they're just as feminist as anyone else. We made a whole video called Torah Feminists Exposed. We had we really liked Matthew Jansen, but he was entirely feminist on this one particular gender dynamics topic. And so we reached out to him personally many times on his wall via Messenger, and he ended up just blocking us. We're like, okay. He's got a whole playlist that pushes feminism, and he raised his daughter to be a complete feminist. Her husband's a total beta. And so we did a 3-hour reaction video to Matthew and Morgan's interview together, just teaching feminism and passing it off as, this is benevolent. This is what the Bible really meant. They just had it wrong for 6,000 years, and we've had it right for the last 5 minutes. So yeah, it's a huge, huge problem. And almost all the women are on board with it. 2/3 of the men are going along with it as feminists, and so it definitely needs called out. Like, with how are we going to convince non-biblical people to be patriarchal when we can't even convince biblical people to be patriarchal? So we might as well start in house first. So
Absolutely.
Is it
interesting? So because I've talked to Matthew Jansen multiple times, and I love the man. I've never seen these videos. I have heard him talk about what he calls biblical patriarchy, or patriarchy done right. Is the words that he'll use. Though I've never heard like an expansive definition on that, but I've heard him speak about it, and so I'd be interested to see these videos, where he leans more feminist. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm just saying, that's not been my experience with him, but I'd be more than happy to examine it and develop an opinion on it.
He has a playlist called "Strong Women in the Bible," and it's just the typical trope of Deborah and Sarah and Yael or whatever. I mean, we kind of talk about it in the video on our channel. It's like there are so many words to describe virtuous biblical women. To use the word strong is just kind of like cope. But we also mentioned in the video, you're either addressing the problem or you're benefiting from the problem. And you probably noticed in some of these threads that we're going to talk about is that, and a big part of Matthew Jansen's channel, no ill will towards the man, but he benefits from a large female audience. And those are a majority of his viewers. And at least in the comments, I know he has a lot of male family men, he talks about Torah, and that's great and all, but there is a reason that that people don't breach the topic, because it comes, even you can make a very simple post like, hey, women should be in shape, and you will be like, it's preposterous.
Yeah, right.
The
carnal sin.
Shout out to the channel Yasplay, made a very simple post like, hey, do women have a hard time apologizing, or do they have a problem with pride? Why do you think women have a problem with pride? Why do you think they have a hard time being humble and apologizing?
Right.
And they wrote this dude a novel, and not every post was a freaking
all women freaked out, and they were so nasty. Oh, they were so biblical. They were just incredibly nasty. Oh my God, I can't believe you'd be so sexist to say that. Why don't you talk about men? Do men have a time apologizing?
Man.
There's nothing godly or biblical about women today, especially in church or in the Torah community. It's an abomination. It's so offensive. And unfortunately, every single person in the West is a feminist. It just depends on like what spectrum you are.
You're right. Yeah.
For generations, we've been feminists. We've been feminists since the hippies, since the boomers in 1946. So for generations, everyone has been a feminist. Like even in our relationship, like we're more patriarchal than most people have ever seen, but there's still some sort of feminism in there, though. We were just born and raised with it. It permeates the culture, and we don't know any different, So I believe the only people doing like gender dynamics right is actually the Muslim community. And I think that in Afghanistan, they take it a little bit too far. It's a little bit too harsh, but they actually have the best gender dynamics on the planet. It's not the Western world, unfortunately. And so they're wrong in everything else, but they got that topic right, But yeah, so Yasplane Gregory Yahoo just had a simple, hey, why do women have such a hard time apologizing, or do you think they do? And he got all the women on his profile just attacked him like crazy. And I've experienced that for years. We both did. And so what we did was, years ago, we actually deleted thousands of women from our profile so that we could actually speak about patriarchy without getting just harassed by the terrorists. Like, women are absolutely terrorists, and that's their number one go-to plan to silence men. Like men are terrified. Yeah,
just exhaust them.
Yeah, men are raised to be beta from birth. Like when they're little, their mom like rules over them with a rod of iron. And so they're like, oh my gosh, you don't want to make mom mad. Mom's gonna hit me. Mom's gonna punish me. She's gonna yell at me. So men are raised to be beta from birth by their mom, and they see their dad be beta to their wife, and so. They just want to be a good little mama's boy to all the women in society, and then they treat their wife the exact way they interacted with their mom. And so virtually every Western man is beta today, and all the women are alpha, and it's a complete satanic usurpation abomination,
Yep.
So let's tie this into one of the tools that women use to try and manipulate men is, it's like Joel said initially, it's kind of like an observable truth. You don't have to be biblical. But a woman will say, but wait, it's written here that actually everything you can see with your eyes is the opposite. So they like to use the Ezer Kenegdo. You know, they bring in the Hebrew. They say, "Oh, it's been mistranslated all along," and you brought this to
Right.
our attention, and we were for some reason not allowed into this group to actually see the comments ourselves. So you sent it to us. So do you want to like synopsize it, or did you want to read it yourself?
Um, Yeah, just so that I'm not misquoting the author, I think it might be beneficial to actually read from the post. It's a little lengthy, but I don't like to misquote people because I want to be 100% above board and know that I'm not misrepresenting the argument that's being made, right?
Yep, I'm just pulling it up right here.
Is this one?
This one?
No, it's the right. It's the right. One more.
Oops.
Yeah, that one.
There we go. Can you see that?
I can see that, and so the screenshots I've avoided names and profile pictures and whatnot. So we're not violating anybody's privacy here, and we're not naming the group that this was posted in, though it is a professing Torah observant group. Which is funny how often this topic comes up in this particular group. It comes up pretty frequently. A couple of times every quarter of a year, roughly. And it always turns into a firestorm where it's some feminist posting feminist nonsense, and then a man posting something about biblical patriarchy, and it's just this constant back and forth struggle on this group between men and women. And that being said, the caveat is that there are some, and I should have taken screenshots of these also, there were some women who were absolutely based. Like, they corrected this post also. There were few and far between, but there were some, and it was awesome. While at the same time, there were some incredibly very beta males who were just kowtowing to what this post is saying. And I'll get to that in a minute because it was pretty gross, actually. But so it's talking about how Joshua 1:1 calls Joshua Moses' assistant. And it occurred to me to look up the word being translated as assistant. So she posts the Strong's number, which is 8334, the word sarat. It's a verb, primitive root, and it means to attend as a menial, or worshiper, figuratively, to contribute to. So let me read the whole post before I actually start giving any kind of commentary. Okay, so this is the same word used when the scriptures are talking about Joseph serving Potiphar and when he attended to prisoners, Aaron, the high priest, attending to the services of the Lord, the sons of Levi in attending to Aaron and the tabernacle, Samuel serving Eli, and before the Lord, Amnon's servant who threw out his sister after he essayed her. I'm not trying to get your guys' YouTube channel demonetized or anything like that. Abishag, ministering to King David in his old age, who happens to be the only woman where this word is used, and she was not his wife, but a servant. Solomon's servants, Elisha attending to Elijah, Gehazi attending to Elisha, the mighty men of valor attending to the king, Jehoshaphat, and in general accounts as servants and chamberlains attending to their king. And suddenly I wondered, if God wanted Eve to be Adam's assistant, if he wanted women to serve their husbands, why wasn't that word used in Genesis in the very beginning that describes his design? Hebrew has a word for assistant. Joshua is called Moses' attendant, servant, minister, assistant, yet Eve was called Ezer Kenegdo, not assistant, not servant, not subordinate. The more I study it, the more I realize we've inherited definitions that do not actually come from the text itself. I grew up hearing that God's design was simple. Men lead, women help. But what if we've misunderstood what kind of help God was describing? What if Eve wasn't created to be Adam's assistant? What if women weren't created to serve their husbands? And it's, what if, it's asking about what if she's supposed to be his counterpart, his equal image bearer, his co-heir and Messiah, the one person in all creation who corresponded to him. I'm still studying, but I can't help but believe that we've inherited lies. I can't help but wonder that we've inherited a design that mocks and degrades our creator's very good design. He shares his design with us in plain language. Have you ever looked into the Hebrew behind helpmeet? Follow along this week as I share what I'm learning. Okay, so that's the whole post. The first thing, like right off the bat, and if you want to change the screen at this point, you can. It does, we're
doing it. Sorry.
I was gonna say I didn't want you to like stop, just because I'm talking. But it's a bit of a straw man, okay? Because for sure, the word that she describes as being assistant is a word in Hebrew that does mean assistant, and it's kind of a gender neutral word, and that it applies, both to men and to women in this capacity. But it's kind of ignoring the fact that the word for maidservant is used of women, and it's used interchangeably with the word wife in Exodus 21 in particular. If you start in Exodus 21, you go to verse 7, which talks about if a man buys a maidservant, right? And then fast forward to verses 10 and 11. It essentially says that if he takes another wife, and this time it's the word for the word for wife, it's not the word for maidservant, right? Then it says that he is obligated to still make good on his promises to the first, right? So a man first takes a maidservant, which is also a different word from the word for manservant, although in Exodus 20, both words are used in one verse. Hang on. The exact verse would be verses 10 and 17. So Exodus 20, verse 10, and then verse 17, use manservant and maidservant. So if you want to look that up, it's identical words that's used in Exodus 21, 7 through 11. And it implies that this maidservant will essentially be a wife to him. And then it says if he takes another wife, which would indicate that the prior was a wife to him, right? So it's using maidservant and wife interchangeably in this capacity. And it says that he still owes that first wife everything that the Torah says that he owes to her, which is essentially financial compensation, protection, provision, and conjugal rights, right? So the first wife still has conjugal rights the same way that the second wife does. But again, the first wife is not called a wife, she's called a maidservant. So the Torah here is using both maidservant and wife interchangeably. I would say it's a very, again, this is going to be an offensive thing for a lot of people to hear, but in the Torah, according to the Torah, the dynamic of a relationship between a husband and wife is, number one, far more paternal than most would dignify. So a husband is, it's not so different from a father to a wife, but also a wife is only like moderately distinguishable from a servant as far as the Torah is concerned, right?
100%. Yeah. I use the term father and eldest daughter is the marriage dynamic that has existed throughout all of history. We said this on one of our videos 4 years ago. It was called dating. We just changed it to arranged marriage. But yeah, in our 4.5 hour video 4 years ago, we mentioned that exactly. That's exactly correct, Bradley. Good.
Absolutely. And as far as Genesis in particular, because that's the big thing. All right. We hear a lot of talk now about the definition of Ezer Kenegdo, as though that somehow doesn't mean that she's subordinate to her husband. I've actually heard multiple times now the idea preached that in the garden before the fall, Adam and Eve were absolute total equals, right? That they were partners in managing creation, and that the man's authority over women came about as a result of the curse in Genesis 3. And the philosophy that I've heard is that because now we're living in a post-messianic age, right, where Jesus came, died on the cross, and that whole bit that they rely on, that now we're not under that curse. And I'm like, well, no, when we're not under that curse is when we're living in the next world, right? When we're actually in heaven with the Father and whatnot, that's when we're not under that curse. As long as we're on this earth, we're under that curse.
If that's the case, the men don't have to work, or at least not in the last 2,000 years. Yeah.
Exactly. Like,
and that's the number one thing women look for. They're like, if I'm not getting tons of money out of this deal, then I don't want it. For the first date, they enforce that. So, yeah, it's all privilege. Everything's a gaslight. And I've said on a bunch of other videos that in order for Eve to be equal to Adam, he would have had to make another man, not a woman. A woman's an inferior vessel in every single way, physically, mentally, and emotionally, in every single way. He would have had to make a man. He had to make Adam and Steve, and he would have had to made her at the exact same time out of the dirt. He clearly was making a distinction of who's in charge by making Adam first and alone from the dirt in his image. And then first, I know this is strange. That's what it says. Adam looks for a helpmate. He looks for a wife amongst the animals. Can't find one close enough compatible. So then eventually, at the end of that day, the sixth day, he makes Eve from his rib. So showing that she's not equal. And yeah, I mean, obviously this had to be the intention all along, but it kind of seems like, well, she was a secondary option to one of the animals apparently. But anyway, it's showing that it's clearly showing she was not equal, because she wasn't made at the same time. Adam was made first and alone. And so, and the thing is too, is men want women, but men do not need women. Men can live out their lifetime just fine without a woman, but women cannot do the same thing without men. So not only do women want men, they need them. It's not the other way around. So like God created women to be dependents. It's obvious. This is just one massive mantra gaslight that just needs to end. I just wonder how long this charade is going to last. I wonder how, and the only way it lasts is because men support it. Like we have like men in their homes, we have men in every organization, schools and government and police and courts. If men didn't support feminism, feminism could not exist, therefore destroying the whole idea of female equality. So, we don't even waste our time talking to women anymore because women are completely narcissistic and sexist. It's a waste of time to talk to women. Because they're just going to advocate what gives them more privilege and power. And they don't care if it's not fair for the man. They don't care if it's bad for the children. They don't care. They don't care if it's true or if it's pleasing to God. And so we can look into the definition of what a help me really means. But that was not that woman's motivation, in order to write that post. It's not like she was on a search for the truth. Like, I think the original Hebrew word meant equal with the help me. And that's my real motivation, just to get to the truth. Her religion, her priority was, I want to be greater than Adam. I want to be equal to Adam and God, greater than Adam and God. I want to empower myself over them, express power and have privilege. So not only do I want all the privilege in society, I want their power and authority too, and I want to give him nothing in return. I don't want to give him anything unless I feel like it, which is going to be never or almost never. So her real motivation was just simply power. It wasn't truth. And so that's why you can quote Paul verses to Christians all day long, and Christian women will still be feminists. They'll just dismiss all the verses from Paul, even though Paul's their favorite author, and they don't even care. And that's why you can show them, we're like, hey, look, there was no feminism in the Tanakh either, Genesis to Malachi. There's clearly no feminism because, as you can see in the Tanakh, a man can have more than one wife, but a woman cannot have more than one husband. So that's a statement of inequality right there. And they just don't care. They'll dismiss all the verses that they don't like, that don't empower them, and then they'll just take a verse and they'll twist it and be like, look, this is proving feminism, this is proving matriarchy, this is proving gonocracy. See right there. They're so devious and manipulative and deceitful. And men need to know this. Like, men just think that women are sweet and they're sugar and spice and everything nice. Like, we're taught that from the earliest of ages, and that's not true. Women will lie and lie and lie and lie and lie to get what they want. Like, they're less benevolent than men. Men are so much more benevolent to the people below them. That's why it's a good thing to have patriarchy men in charge. Men will look out for the people below them and give them all kinds of privilege and protection and love and everything else. And we can see time and time and time again where women don't do that. I'll just make this last point and we can keep going on. We see that when women have power over inferior vessels like their children, they kill them like they're babies in abortion. They treat them badly. And we all have a bad story. Like both Leora and I, our moms were horrible to this. They ruined our families. They were completely feminist, even though my mom didn't identify as such. And they treated us horribly. Like they weren't fair. They were fickle. They didn't have a standard of rules. Like they weren't benevolent and like egalitarian with the kids. They weren't going to share their power with the kids and everything else. So our moms were awful. They're not benevolent to the people below them. They don't care if they're fair with men, like offering them the equal exchange for what the men are providing, the protection and provision. And so it's a completely and if you look at some of the female queens in the past, they were more vindictive. They went to war
Yep.
more often, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we see women in positions of power, they're not benevolent to the people below them, and they also aren't egalitarian with either fellow women too. They have all kinds of rivalries and they fight and they bicker and they backstab. So it's not true that women are more benevolent than men. Pearl's making this point like continually. Women are less benevolent than men. Sure, there are some bad men out there, but most men are good and they're fair and they're benevolent. And actually, that is not true with women. And so it's so necessary to have men in charge to actually check females' toxic estrogen and like their malevolence, to keep women's malevolence in check. That's why the man is so important. That's why it's so important for the man to have authority. We just watched an episode about like the infamous like Mormon wife that she had like a spiritual advisor, satanic advisor, and she infiltrated the home. And this was in Utah, and then she started torturing specifically her boy, but like just started like torturing her kids and
influencer mother.
She almost
Ruby something.
Do you remember the series?
It was a docu-series on Hulu about Ruby.
It just happened in like 2023.
Oh wow! So pretty recent.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So
Ruby Frankie.
Yeah, so there was this wealthy family. The husband was a beta, and she was a YouTube influencer and narcissistic, and she got attached with this spiritual woman that like was a scammer. She made this whole brand as like a spiritual advisor, and she somehow talked her way into living with them, kicked the husband out of the home for a year, and they had no contact. And then over that year, they kicked the older two siblings out, which would have checked the toxic femininity. And then there was 4 kids left, and they and it was so crazy. They were torturing the boy. The boy almost died, and a boy escaped to the neighbor house and called the parents over and blah blah blah. Yeah. So it's and as we can see, like the kids that are raised with a single dad have virtual results when they're raised with a dad and the mom. So the dad is the more important parent. The dad's the better parent, the more competent parent, the more benevolent parent. And so we've just been lied to over and over and over again. Everyone believes that women are good, men are bad, women are good, men are bad, women are good, men are bad. It's not true. What we can see is as women have more freedom and independence and power, they keep doing bad things. They're doing bad things to everyone and even their own life, and they don't even realize until it's too late. So we see women being super promiscuous. Like they said that only men were promiscuous, and they're being super promiscuous. And then they're once they ruin their life, and they blame them. Why did you let me do that? They blame the men for that as well. So
yep.
All the women want to adopt all the traits that they criticize men of having, the toxic masculine traits. They're all adopting all of that, and the irony. But we haven't seen greater benevolence or anything good come out of this feminist movement. It's been a totally failed social experiment for 106 years. I just wonder how long it will last.
This woman who made this post is really clearly dwelling on it, either for the hope of overcompensating or justifying her life as a single spinster, rather than being a steward of her vessel and helping men in what was her function, her original design. But go ahead and we can look at some of the replies if you want. Give us a bit of your take.
Well, before that, I think you've mentioned several things that are worth discussing a little bit. Number one is narcissism. So you brought that up multiple times, and this is something. So I am number 2 out of 7. My parents have 7 boys, and all of my younger brothers are all infinitely smarter than me, in different ways. They've some of them have ventured more into socioeconomics, and some of them have ventured into psychology. So in particular, one of my younger brothers, who is very interested in psychology, has noted that the psychology community has kind of they've blamed men more for narcissism than women. And that's because they've essentially refused to acknowledge that there are 2 types of narcissism. There's overt narcissism and there's covert narcissism. Okay, overt narcissism is by and large more associated with men, right? Because that's the form of narcissism that tries to impose, right? It tries to threaten. It tries to just impose one's own will by force. Which, of course, men being the stronger of the genders, have that ability and would tend towards more towards that. Covert narcissism is one that the psychology community has, by and large, denied exists. There are a few pockets that are putting more research into it and are insisting that it does exist, but for the most part, this is still being highly debated in the psychological community. But covert narcissism is the kind of narcissism that we would associate with women. Right? Women are more likely to be covert narcissists because their narcissism comes out in ways that are under the radar. It doesn't look like narcissism right out the gate. And it often shows up in the form of self-victimization, right? Which is what we see in women. But the other thing that you mentioned is, the importance of a father and how fathers tend to be more benevolent and whatnot. This is something that the psychology community does, for the most part, acknowledge is that children learn empathy from their fathers, for the most part. It's not to say that they don't learn any of it from their mothers, but they mainly learn it from their fathers. That's who they learn empathy from. So the sexism that we witness in the world broadly, the feminism, or it's funny. I am a big fan of borrowing the language of the left against the left, right? So they talk a lot about how we're in a late stage capitalist society, and I'll hear that all the time from people who are like pro-communist and whatnot. I would say that we're in a late stage feminist society, right? We have had it so long, like you said, that it's just ingrained into certain parts of how we view the world, into our entire worldview, and it's almost inescapable. So we are in late stage feminism now, to the point that it is affecting interpersonal relationships between men and women. They can't even date one another now because of how ingrained feminism is in society. But part of that late stage feminism is the fact that, like, academic communities aren't even willing to admit that women have or are even capable of having certain problems that they would say that men have, like narcissism. And they don't focus enough on things like the fact that children learn empathy from their fathers. So it's such a convoluted mess that we have inherited from previous generations, especially, I would say boomers are one of the worst culprits for having just simped to the women of their generation.
Totes.
Feminism existed prior to that, but man, they really did a number on society.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't
they
even,
did.
they are so apathetic to the repercussions of their choices that they won't even consider what the people, their descendants have to say about it. They actually view their kids almost like their oppressors, like their parents.
Yes.
The hippie part of them, even if you weren't a hippie back in that day, that was such a voracious part of the culture. Virtually every boomer is a hippie. And
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The World War II generation is virtually entirely has died out, and so the generation after the World War II generation was the baby boomers, which were the hippies. Both my parents fall into that category. One born in 1946 and one born in 1957. And so, yeah, the reason why things are so crazy now, and like the older people seem so feminist, is because they're the ones that pushed second wave feminism, hardcore,
Yep.
And so now they're the old people. They're our parents, but they're most people's grandparents. My mom's going to be 80 this year. So my mom's going to be 80 as a total feminist, although she would absolutely deny that, but she's feminist in every way. And so is my grandma. My grandma is still alive. She's 94. She's born in 1931. She'll be 95 this year. Total feminist, although she would deny that as well. So, but yeah, the oldest people in society are the ones that pushed second wave feminism in the 60s and 70s. They were the hippies, And
Yep.
so Gen X, unfortunately, was a total bust. The latchkey kids, they just decided that the way to go is be apathetic about everything and listen to rock and roll. And so they didn't oppose it. They're like, well, we're not going to be as feminist as the hippies were, because that was kind of a failure, but we're not going to fight to change it either. My generation, mostly they went along with feminism as well. And then Gen Z was the most feminist generation ever, the reason why there's a higher percentage of Gen Z boys that are young men that aren't feminists is because they've been completely shut out of the dating market. Like they can't even get a date, like they're in their 20s and sometimes
Right.
30s, and they're virgins. They haven't had a first date, a first kiss. The women are so hypergamous and they're so sexist. And also the Gen Zs were raised by the highest percentage of single moms, so they're more feminine than all the other boys. That they didn't have a dad that forced them to play sports and working out like I did. So they're skinny. They play video games, and the women don't want them because they're not attractive. They're not masculine. They're not alpha and patriarchal and everything. They're not alpha. So the women don't want them at all. Plus with hypergamy, so they can't even get a date. They're like, okay, this whole thing's a sham. It's like dating's not leading me to get a higher quality wife. It's leading me to get no wife at all. So, so Gen Z is not the reason they're becoming more based is not because they just had the willpower. It's because the women were so evil and hypergamous that they forced them to be virgin and incels. So they have no choice but to question the system. But we're just starting to complain about it now. Nothing's been changing in the right direction, but hopefully the complaining will turn into action at some point.
So something you brought up here is, and this is an interesting statistic, because of course this is the constant feminist accusation against the red pill, is that it's just a bunch of incels that can't get dates and whatnot, and that's the accusation that feminists give. But if you actually run the statistics on like the most based Giga Chad men, who are like entirely on board with the red pill, a substantial portion of them are actually, men who do rather well with women, right? They're men who do go on more regular dates and whatnot. So it's interesting because it's not to say that the men who have no experience with women and can't get dates are not in the red pill community, because they certainly are. But like the driving force of a lot of it actually is men who have, I would dare say, an overexposure to feminine behavior, right? They experience contact with women so much that they've become red pilled.
Yeah. Yeah. For the record here, we're all millennials here, and of course we're married, Joel and Leora, and Brad is married with a kid, so we don't fall into that category. Yeah, the people that are red pilled about women, red pill means know the truth of. They don't accept the current false propaganda. That's what red pill means for all of the left that tries to gaslight about it being something else. It comes from the Matrix, of course. The red pill is the truth. The blue pill is the mainstream lie. So yeah, it's the men that had the most success with women, and it's the men that have had no success with women. They've been observing from a third-party perspective that actually know the truth about how women really are versus what women always present themselves to be. And it's the guys in the middle that have only been with like one woman. They were virgins and they got married, and their mating strategy was to be beta. Like, oh, I got to be a good little submissive simp if I want to get a wife, because that's what they're telling me I have to do. So I'll do that, and I don't feel like I can have the courage, or I don't want to have the fortitude to develop to be an alpha man. So I'll just accept being beta, and I'll get a wife, and that'll be the. So they're afraid. So it's the guys in the middle that are perpetuating feminism. Yeah, like you said, and I, since we're talking about that, I fell into the category. I was definitely not a virgin incel. So I definitely fell more on the player side, and so that's why I'm so passionate about this topic, is because. I've always liked women. I was my mom's favorite, and my sister's favorite. And I was always really interested in women. I was reading magazines when I was 11 years old, Men's Health, like, oh, what do the women want? What are the women saying? How can I be a man that women want? And so I dated a lot. And then after all that dating and all these different relationships, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything they're doing is the exact opposite of what they're saying. They're lying all the time. They don't actually do anything that they say. In fact, they do the exact opposite. So if you just believe and do the exact opposite of what women tell you, you will then be successful. But if you believe and do the things that women do tell you, you will not be successful with them. And it's just a fascinating dynamic. So if you want to have success with a woman, you have to get it from a man that's had success, because if you take women's advice about women, you will fail 100% with women.
No psychologist will ever tell you that.
Yeah. And so that's why it's so difficult for men, like in the middle. It's so difficult for men in the middle to understand that, because that's such a counter psychological, trippy idea. That, and men are straightforward. It's the women that are like, women are all about counter psychology. They're always like, grass is greener on the other side. So they were given the better gender role, right? they get all the privilege, the protection. They don't have to go die in war. They don't have to die with the home invader. They don't have to be a slave to be the provision. They don't have to build the house, all the manual labor and everything. So they were given the better gender role, but because of their counter psychological nature, eating from the fruit in the garden, they're like, oh, I know I have paradise, but maybe eating from the fruit is more paradise, or hey, I know I have the better gender role, but what if I don't? What if the men have the better gender role? And that's what feminism is. And so, so no matter and so that's the thing too, is no matter what situation women have, they'll always be ungrateful. They'll always complain, and they always think that whatever they don't have is going to be better, and whatever they do have isn't good enough. And so that's why you should never listen to women. They don't even know, like they're inferior mentally, so they can't even think this through long term and find out what would actually even be good for them. When they're actually,
as I like to say,
completely compromised vessel.
Recently, I've been calling them just a compromised vessel because of the nature of the design of the period. It just makes them unstable. Like, it's way too fluctuating. Our hormones levels fluctuate way too much to be at a stable state of discernment. So like we like when a woman has a period, she's feeling something and she will find an external reason to blame it, when really it's all happening on a cellular level. This is what we do.
The design,
we're compromised in that.
If you've seen one of the graphs of like the estrogen and then a less known hormone but equal as progesterone in a woman's body, like it's like a sine curve. So a woman is experiencing like these influxes and defluxes of hormones. So they're never stable. That's why they're crying one minute and then they're angry the next minute and they're insecure like the next minute, and they're constantly expressing all these different emotions that men don't have. Men can't relate to that, and men are even keel. So there's so many good reasons from being the stronger vessel to being stable and logical and more intelligent for why women should be, or why men should be the leaders and women should follow. And so the only thing that makes women happy is actually having a husband, having a strong husband, and getting told no, getting told, hey, you will do this. This is your purpose and role. And this is what you will not do. You will not be allowed to do this in this relationship. And like, they're not like men, they're like, oh my God, I feel so safe. Oh, big daddy. Oh, phew. I'm so glad I feel so safe and so taken care of. And I got a strong man that's going to protect me and lead me. This is great. So the exact opposite of what we're hearing today is what actually makes women happy and feel safe and everything else. And I remember like actually treating women equal, like in all of my former relationships. I really bought into the egalitarianism. I really wanted that. I was like, it sounds so good. And the women hated it, and the relationships ended in disaster, and they were constantly upset because I was treating them equally, and they were like, "Why are you treating me equally? I'm not equal." Like, I mean, every woman knows that if you don't call her baby, like everyone wants to be called baby in a relationship, right? That's their favorite term. Call me baby. Call me baby. If you don't call me baby, I don't want it. So
right.
What equal wants to be called baby? Like the guys don't want to be called baby. They accept it because they know that women love babies. But like, guys want to be called like stud, or husband, something like that. Like not baby, So
right, killer, tiger.
Go ahead, Bradley.
Yeah, no. So 100% with everything that you've said so far. The you touched on one thing. Man, I'm trying to remember what it was because I had a thought as soon as you said it, but it's escaping me for right now.
You'll think of it, and you can interrupt if you remember.
I do want to ask you, Bradley. Like, you're probably in more of these groups because we've just kind of
we've gotten out of all groups.
They're just run by women, so your patience has outlasted ours. So good for you. But we actually get a lot of messages for men because that's our audience. People think it's weird that I message men. I'm just messaging you to get you to Jill. That's how I can help him. But why we get a lot of messages from them saying that they find the Torah women to be actually worse than some of the Christian women, worse than like even a regular maybe Jewish girl or an atheist girl or a leftist girl. Like at least the leftists won't try and use the Bible to bash you over the head with it with their piety. Like, what is it about the Torah women, do you think, that makes them so insufferable, makes them so unwife-like, so unwifeable? We're constantly hearing it.
So before I answer that, I did just remember. So
awesome.
I Joel, I share a past with you. I in a much older time, when I was much younger, I was very successful with women. a matter of fact, even from a pretty young age, like, my family and, church community, I was compared to little Joe from Bonanza a lot. Like, I was just kind of a natural ladies man. And it wasn't until I got involved in a pretty serious relationship with a very obvious covert narcissist. Of course, I didn't know what that was back then. That I experienced the absolute disaster that brought me to a point of being able to understand women. So that's like the big thing, is like society tells us that women are mysterious and men just can't understand them. It's actually not true. Women are pretty simple and they're very easy to understand. You just have to kind of face the reality of the way that the creation has been brought about for that. And generally that's what was that?
They're just crazy.
Yeah. It's one of those things that generally only men who are successful with women will end up understanding. So there's a YouTube channel called Psyche Depth. And he goes over mainly the psychological underpinnings of what causes turmoil in a relationship between men and women. He's pretty based, pretty red pilled in his way of explaining things. And he explained in one video that the man who has that amount of success with women, like the guy who just walks into a coffee shop and every woman has just pinned her attention to him, he's probably experienced a pretty severe heartbreak at some point in his past. And that is what caused him to turn every scenario over in his head that led to the ultimate demise of that relationship, to the point that it's acknowledged even by psychologists that those men understand women as well as psychologists do, because they, from that point, they approach dating as though it's experimental, right? They'll go on dates with even women they're not attracted to just to talk and try to learn to understand women. And then they do, and that makes them very successful with women. The only problem is at that point, they're actually so emotionally screwed up from the trauma of a previous relationship that they're emotionally inaccessible to women, which makes women like them more. Right. So it's kind of one of those things that, like, in order to maintain the attention of a woman, you have to be at a certain level of distance where it's constantly some kind of a challenge for her to be close to him and whatnot, that to keep that obsession alive. So that was what I wanted to say. To answer your question, 100% true. My experience has been that I have encountered more feminism from women in the Torah movement than the rest of Christianity abroad, to the point that my friends who are single men, who are Torah pursuant men, my advice to them is always don't date women who are Torah observant. Just don't. Okay.
Wow. Yeah,
Go to a traditional, old-fashioned, traditional valued church. Probably in most cases going to be something from like the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. And I don't particularly like the Independent Fundamental Baptists for a lot of other reasons, but one thing they do right is to teach women what their role is. And so find a woman from that kind of church and then teach her Torah. Right? That's my advice. That's what I did. That's the kind of background my wife came out of. And it's been pretty successful so far. But I would never tell any of my friends to date women from the Torah observant community. And my guess as to why that is the case is because for some reason, the Torah community, by and large, comes out of extremely charismatic Christian backgrounds. And charismatic Christian backgrounds are so oversaturated with mysticism and spiritualism, which is the one thing that women will capitalize on more than anything else, right? It's why witchcraft has such a prominent component of women. Matter of fact, this is something even the Jewish Talmud talks about, that women are actually more susceptible to witchcraft than men. It's funny. This is one of the primary reasons that there's a YouTube creator and TikTok creator called Womp Tomp. He does a lot of political takes, but one of the things that he's mentioned is like, this is one of the reasons it's probably not good for women to be in government, because you want me to be governed by somebody whose emotions are dictated by the phase of the moon? Like, make that make sense.
Yeah.
One of many reasons.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
They are very like Pentecostal, I would say, from
Yes.
the denominations they come from. We've like seen Torah churches, whatever you want to call them. They're like flailing with the flags. We're like, what's going on here? We literally drove an hour and a half each way to find this little place because we we couldn't find whatever. It's bad out there. It's bad, and we basically denounced church entirely because they're all compromised in their businesses, and they're at the hand of women. But we drove an hour and a half away, and we walk into this tiny little church or whatever it is, and it's a woman speaking, and we're like, what on earth? Like, it doesn't matter how small the town is. It doesn't matter. They're freaking preaching feminism in Afghanistan, or at least they were before the Taliban took over again. I mean, it's really in every nook and cranny in the world. But like I said, we've gotten repeat messages about like, wow, these women in Torah are just voracious. They're just like some of the worst women we've ever encountered, worse than, a secular agnostic lady.
Right.
I want to like actually just hammer home this one point I brought up earlier that I think really just demonstrates the whole situation. Is the reason why men should be in charge is because, well, not only are they more competent vessels, but it's because they look out for the people below them, right? And women don't do that. I want to give like some examples. Women are selfish, and men need to know this. They're selfish, and that's putting it just nicely. They're so selfish. They do not care about like the other half of the population, about men. They do not look out for the people below them. They look out for themselves, and they don't mind if the other people are harmed in the situation. So they keep gaslighting us, telling us that they do, but they don't. So for example, we were taught that with feminism, if women make more money, that's going to be a good thing for men because then the women are going to share their money with the men. No woman has ever shared money with any man ever. Like it's been 106 years of feminism. Women will not even pay for their own coffee on a first date in 2026. They do. So yep. So they're still not paying their own way. And the thing is, and a lot of times the feminists say that, they think they want role reversal. No, they don't at all. They're like, oh, we want the man's role because the man's role is better. We want men to do the women's role. So we want to make all the money and the man stay home with the kids. No, they don't. No woman, women will not date a man that even makes the same amount of money as he does, let alone less. Women think that making more money actually entitles them to a man who makes more money. So they think this is awesome. I'm just getting a richer man. No, the men don't care about women's money because women don't share their money with men. That's why they don't care how much money a woman makes. They don't care how long she goes to college, blah, 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 blah. It's because men don't benefit from women's money, because women don't share, so if women had if they had the same benevolence men did, they would be fine changing roles. They'd be fine, be like, oh yeah, cool. Women are like, we'll be the protectors now. We'll go fight the wars. We'll protect you from the home invader. We'll go ahead and do the manual labor. Like how many women do we have in manual labor? Virtually 0%. In construction, et cetera, and so, and even though women can and do make the same and more money than men do, there are more women in middle management than men. There are more women in the law field than men are. There are more women going to college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've artificially pushed women up through DEI, even though there are tons of women that actually can and do make more money than men. They are not like okay with being the breadwinners for life. Like no woman is okay being the primary breadwinner for life. They just aren't. Like
and if they are, it's negligible.
It's not. Like if a man loses his job, the woman leaves. The woman's in it for the money. She's not in it for love. The women are in it for these reasons: protection, number one; provision, number two. Yep. You have to be bigger and stronger. That's why they look for tall guys. Like I need a guy that's 7 feet tall. Like why?
Right.
Well, he's helpless. She's a child. She wants protection. And the reason why it's a deal breaker for them if you don't pay for their coffee on the first date, and now they're even like denying coffee dates. Apparently, they want
$100 dinner at bare minimum.
Which has been $1,000 on the first date, and then not give you a second date, and want you to be okay with that. So is because they want you to pay for them for life. So they're like, well, if he won't even pay for my coffee on the first date, how am I going to be able to milk him for money for the rest of his life? So, and I'm primarily in it for the money, not for love. So. There's no reason for me to go on a second date with this guy because I was never in it for him in the first place. I'm not in it for love. I'm in it for money. So guys need to get this through their feminist little beta heads, that like women are selfish and women will never engage in a relationship where they're not benefiting more from it. That's the thing. So this whole egalitarian equality gaslight is so incredibly false. It's just such a joke and a half. Like, where men have, throughout all of history, men will get involved in relationships. Obviously, they have to, where they don't benefit as much. They're either not benefiting at all or as much, but they have a very unfair deal with a woman, and they're okay with it. So men are okay with giving privilege and looking out for the benefit of people below them, but women are not. They say that short men should die all the time. They're like, they don't view short men as human. Like they're so dehumanizing. If you're short, they don't care if you die. If you have a bad, women don't care about men's quality of life. They don't care at all. They only care about themselves, and they only care about themselves even over other women too. They don't care if all women are doing okay. They only use that as a power mechanism so that they can increase their privilege and power. So, for men, if men are too poor, they don't care. They don't care if they die on the side of the road. They're like, oh, you're poor, you're worthless. If the guy's ugly, they don't care. They're like, you should be a slave. I don't care about you, your quality of life. So, and men are much more benevolent. They want everyone to be doing well. They want everyone to be okay. They don't want anyone to be like left high and dry, etc. So men are benevolent and women are not. And
and women are
Republicans and Christians and Torah men need to get on this page. Such a small percentage of us.
Yeah, a lot of women will pearl clutch hearing all of this stuff from Jill. I'm about to pass you the baton. Like they pearl clutch. They're like, not me, not my mom, not my sister, not us. No. The reason that women have only themselves to blame for these conclusions. Like when Jill talks like this, I don't take personal offense because that wasn't relevant to me. If that'd been his experience with women,
right,
they have themselves to blame for it. If a woman watches this and thinks that these are unsavory conclusions that a man shouldn't come to, well, like blame your sisters, blame your mom, blame yourself. Like be different. Don't get triggered. Just be different. And I was just telling Joel today, like women have like a communist, fascist side of them. Like let's look at the children, because women, if you put it in the view of their children, it's a little bit easier to understand. Let's say you have little Tommy, and Tommy didn't win like the race, but she wants everyone to get a trophy, so Tommy feels special. But let's say Tommy like got a bunch of apples, and Billy over there doesn't have any apples. In those circumstances, she will be like, don't share it. Save it to yourself so you can thrive, so you can be better, so women don't have like the sense of like social justice, which is so ironic because they call themselves social justice warriors. They're actually they care the least about social justice. They're doing it all for their own personal benefit, and they don't come to realize that until they're old and alone, and all of their social justice friends that were concerned about everybody doing well communally have abandoned her, and she's just like collecting dust like a little whatever. So, it's really crazy. They're both fascist and communist, which are kind of like the same idea, but it always only depending on their position in the dynamic. If they're losing, they're communists. If they're winning, they're fascists. It's so crazy.
Yeah, look at some of the favorite, their famous lines out there. I'll just say this little colloquialism, and then you can take it away, Bradley. Like, women say fat girls need love too. Do they have a line that says short guys need love too? And they're like, no, they don't. No, definitely not. Like, there's no line that says that. And then there's also this line from Cardi B that says broke guys don't deserve no woman, right? I know that's right. So they have no empathy. If you're too short, if you're too short or if you're too broke, they don't care if you die. Like
for the birds.
They don't have love in their hearts. They do not have love in their hearts. They just they only want to benefit themselves, to benefit and empower themselves, and they don't care if it hurts anybody else. They don't want everyone to be doing well. They just want them to be doing well. And so that's why it's a disaster if they're in charge in politics, in school, and that's why it's a disaster if they're in charge in businesses, if they're in charge in your relationship, because they'll benefit themselves, and they don't care if you're harmed by it. They don't care like about your quality of life. So let alone your feeling.
That is something else that the psychological community, what we've discussed so far, they've been aware of for a long time, but they've only really come down hard on one side of it in broader society, right? So we hear a lot about the conditions that males grow up in from a young age, and how their tendency towards aggression and anger and whatnot from a young age, and how that affects adult men, and why adult men are the way that they are, and why men are bad, and that whole thing. But one of the things that has been known and has been observed in psychology for a long time now is young girls tendency to try and orchestrate fairness, but they only do it where it will give them some kind of an advantage. So they're not actually out to make it fair for everybody. They're just out to get something for themselves and using fairness as a way to achieve that. Right? And they do this from a very young age.
Deceitful. Yep, exactly.
Right, and then their desire for superiority, which is that this is the biggest irony, because they say they want equality, but then their behavior dictates that they actually want somebody who is superior to them. They want a man who is superior to them. This is something Andrew Wilson has brought out on the Whatever podcast multiple times, where he's just like, look, you want a man who makes more money than you, who has better physical prowess than you, who is more attractive than you, and who is smarter than you. You want a man who is superior to you. That is actually what you want. You just don't want to admit that that's the case.
Yep, 100%.
And then there's the paradox of like power and projection. So most reasonable women, and you know that can be a controversial phrase in and of itself, but most reasonable women can acknowledge and understand that, you know, men have a monopoly on force, right? We are physically stronger than women. And this is the principle from which they derive a lot of their vitriol against men, and all of the things that they would blame men for are for reasons that men are stronger than them. And they're judging men that have done nothing to them. This is why most of them chose the bear instead of the man, in spite of like what would obviously happen in that scenario. And that is because of the feminine tendency towards projection, right? See, Joel, you are physically stronger than Lior, right? But you view that as a responsibility, right? That's not a level of power that you exert over her. That's a responsibility that you have, right? Whereas when these women blame men who have done nothing to them for all of the evils that men are capable of doing, what they're doing is projecting. What they're doing is telling you what they would do if they had that kind of power.
Exactly. Yeah, we talk about that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and it's wild because, you know, it comes from that point of not viewing it as a responsibility the way that men do, right? Strong men view their strength as a responsibility. This is why nature seems to make it such that like the strongest men are always like emotional teddy bears, because like it is an extreme responsibility that men have. But you know, maybe to pivot this to the Bible just a little bit, because we've talked around some of the examples that women will always give. You know, we always get the example of Deborah. That's the one that stands out the most, right? Yeah, Christian women, especially in the Torah observing community, they'll point out how, you know, Deborah was a judge over Israel. And it's like, okay, well, like, let's really examine the book of Judges.
Oh my gosh.
All right. The book of Judges says, God raised up so-and-so who was a male. God raised up so-and-so who was a male. God raised up so-and-so, right? And it just goes on. And then you get to Deborah, and it says, Deborah was judging in Israel in those days. And then immediately after, it returns to form. God raised up so-and-so who was a male. God raised up so-and-so who was a male. Like, Deborah's the only one who wasn't appointed by God.
Yeah. There are two verses that are like just so subtle, and they're just stuck in there, and it just moves on with the story. There's almost no information about Deborah.
And even so is an exception. They're all being like, I'm a prophetess too. Like, you can't all be prophetesses. You can't all be queens. Like, he's like, no.
Right. Well, and so on the idea of prophetesses, so we can use the example of Moses too, because that was why his sister was stricken with leprosy. Was she purported to be equal to Moses, right? She literally said, are we not also prophets? Speaking of her and Aaron, but it was her speaking, not Aaron.
And she rebuked him.
Right. And she's the one that God struck with leprosy. And God said, I speak to Moses unlike any other prophet, right? I don't speak through visions. I don't speak through dreams. I speak to Moses face to face, right? It's one thing that he expounded to Miriam to explain that, like, no, you are not like Moses. Right. I've chosen Moses for this role. But also even we get a lot of examples out of the New Testament. And one thing that stands out is like, OK, so sure, we've got some like deaconesses and whatnot that are mentioned. But first of all, the role of a deacon is like internal church service is something that is interesting. I heard a pastor once talk about the difference between a church elder and a deacon. is that an elder is like external service. It's like, ministry beyond the church. And then a deacon is internal service, right? A deacon is taking care of the church body itself. So that's not really a role of authority. Like that's a role of service. But to further the point, why weren't there any women at the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15? Right? Why was it only men who were speaking there?
Yeah, exactly. Another point to this too. It's so silly. Like sometimes Christians will try to gaslight and say that the New Testament is feminist, and they're just correcting the verse 4,000 years of evil patriarchy. And they'll say, oh, Jesus, who his actual name is Joshua in English. So they're like, oh, Jesus he was a feminist. We know that for sure. I was like, oh, really? Is that why he didn't pick a single of his 12 disciples to be a woman? Like not 6 of them, not even one of them, 0 women out of the 12 disciples. He could have set the record straight and showed, hey, you know what? I really wanted equality from the beginning, and they just didn't get the message or whatever. 12 out of 12 disciples were men, So yep. it's all picking and choosing.
Yep.
And that's his strongest case for patriarchy as you can make. He could have picked 6 women. He could have picked 1 woman. He didn't pick any out of 12.
To pivot this back to Genesis, because that's kind of really the main topic that was being talked about in the initial post, and maybe we can go over some of the slides.
Yeah, I have
to go over the narrative real quick, just to really set the dynamic before we address Ezer Kenegdo and all of that. 2 things. If we look at the sequence of events, right? Adam was created. If we follow the sequence of creation, God created several independent ecosystems, right? He created dry land. He created the ocean. Those are like the 2 big ones. And then he created large creatures that you could say act as a sort of authority over those domains, right? He created the large sea beasts, and those are the last things he created as far as the oceanic life is concerned. And then over all of this creation, all of it, he set man, he set Adam. And then he orchestrated to have all of these animals come before Adam to be named. All right. So to give a name is something that is authoritative in Scripture, right? This is something that's actually specifically a father's duty, is to give names to his children. And so Adam names all the animals, and in the process finds out that there are none who are like him, right? There are none that are human. So then God causes this sleep to fall over Adam, and he takes his rib and he forms Eve out of it. And then what's the next thing he does? He sets Eve before Adam the same way he set all of the animals prior, and Adam names Eve, right? Adam is the one who gives Eve her name twice, actually. First, he says, this is woman, and then he names her Eve later, saying that she is the mother of all the living. So Adam is the one who possesses the authority to name Eve. So this is before the curse. Before the curse, Eve is actually set kind of right next to the animals. I'm not making a comparison that women are animals here, but this is what the text of Scripture says, is that in as much as Adam's authority over her, she is placed under him as something to be named the same way the rest of the animals are. Right? And that comes right out of the text of Scripture.
It's like Yah, God, I am. Yah names Adam, Yah's superior to Adam, and then Adam names Eve like you would name your child, right?
Yes,
absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
And then later, and this is an interesting take. I saw one YouTube video that went over several examples of what the creator would say are simps in the Bible, and that's a fascinating topic to go over because there are a lot more than you would think.
Yeah,
but I would say that Adam was the first. Right, absolutely. Adam was the first simp, and the reason the reason is because the Red Pill community talks about a lot about women avoiding accountability and men facilitating this by constantly protecting them from accountability and whatnot. Adam really is the first example because Eve ate the fruit, but Adam didn't have to eat the fruit. What would have happened had Adam not eaten the fruit? Well, Eve would have been cursed, right? She would have had the accountability of her actions, and God likely would have just created another helpmeet for him.
Exactly. I'm so glad. Yeah, I talk about this all the time. Yep, exactly. Good one.
So what Adam does though, and it's not like he didn't know where the fruit came from. He knew exactly where it came from as far as the text is concerned, but he ate it anyway. Why? And so we get to this whole blame shifting conversation, and I've talked about this before, where Adam is accused of blame shifting, And I think that it's unwarranted, because you can ask people, where exactly does Adam blame Eve? And you can't really isolate an example, because when people say, well, he said, the woman that you gave me, she gave me the fruit and I ate. It's like, okay, well, that's actually just an accurate recounting of what happened.
Exactly. That was just true.
That's
Yeah.
and he's accepting responsibility. He says at the end of it, and I ate. Right? He is accepting the responsibility of his actions. And the emphasis here is what's at play. So Judaism actually even acknowledges a second possibility where he's blaming God and not Eve. So it's not the woman that you gave me, it's the woman that you gave me, right? And he's blaming God for this. But I would submit that there's a third possibility, and it still focuses on emphasis. So there's the woman that you gave me, there's the woman that you gave me, and then there's the woman that you gave me, right? In that he is accepting that God put her under his responsibility, and he loves her at this point. So far as we know, Adam loved Eve. He had a strong emotional connection to her, and understanding that she would be condemned and damned for the rest of her life at this point, not wanting her to suffer that alone, he ate the fruit so that he could be with her in that state of being. And that actually is messianic in its own right. That is an example of Adam taking on the iniquity of his wife, right? So that she's not alone in this condemned state.
Yeah, that's been my take. My whole life, that's been my take as well. And I've never heard that take from the pulpit before. And even today on any kind of YouTube channels or Facebook, that is the correct take. That's what the story says. Yeah, and that clearly seems to be the motivation as well.
Absolutely.
Why don't we look at some? Oh, sorry. Did you finish?
No. Yeah, go ahead.
Why we can look at some, because you took the time to find these comments, and so I want to respect that.
I'll just one. What should have happened, or we all know what did happen. What should have happened is the right thing for Adam to have done in that situation, like you said earlier, was to say, like, wow, Eve, you really screwed up. Myself and Yah told you not to do that. Like, now you're going to get kicked out of the garden, and I'm staying in with Yah, and he's going to create me a new wife, So that's what Adam should have done. So from like, it's after 6,000 years, men still aren't learning it all from the very first story. They're just repeating the first story over and over and over again. It's like, hey, look, if women decide to be evil, men, you can't support it. You can't go with them. You have to let them go to their own destruction. Try to make a woman good. If you can't, then be by yourself. You can't just follow them wherever they lead, no matter how wicked it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, women sin for money and power. Women sin for money and power, and men sin for women. And men would be live a very quiet and simple Spartan life if it weren't for all of women's class wars and desires and bitterness, I don't understand women. Women understand women and they hate each other. It's like,
Al Bundy, yeah. All of feminism comes from coveting. Like, women are the inferior vessel. It's obvious. They know more than anything. They're insecure and they feel unsafe all the time. They want a man to protect and provide for them. So they covet the design of men. They covet men's vessel. And so that's what all of this goes back to, and they don't realize that they were born the lucky gender. They're born the gender with more privilege, but they should not get authority with that. So instead of being grateful and thankful, they're covetous. That's what all of this comes from. That's what Eve did. And all the way to this day, it's just women feeling insecure and coveting.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
it's a sin for a reason. Okay, let's share the screen because you shared these reactions. Some of people's is this one correct? All right, we got here. Yahweh is the only other one called Ezer Kenegdo. In situations without him, all would be lost. It's actually a very string warrior title describer.
Yep.
But it's saying, because Yah is called Ezer Kenegdo, therefore a woman is like basically given the authority or the influence that Yah has over man. It's just so twisted. It makes me think women say when men are the head, but women are the neck. It's like whatever you give them an inch, they try and take a mile. It's
yeah. So what women are saying with this post is they're saying that women are God, women are equal to God. Like men should submit to women because women are God. Okay, maybe not physically, but mentally and emotionally, they're like God, and they know better. And it's women really do think that they're God today. They really are putting off that like women are God and men must submit to them or men are evil.
Well,
Right.
It's
it
crazy.
also betrays the intention, because remember what I said earlier, that they only want fairness where it gives them an advantage, right? And this is just part of their nature. And that's not to say that men don't have negative aspects of their own internal nature. We certainly do. But this is one of those areas where it betrays the actual intention behind the contention, is because this post initially is about equality, but then once you give them that inch, the mile that they take is, well, women are actually like God,
So
right?
so
And so
fascinating.
it immediately just jumps to that, and it's the comparison, and not only that, it's emphatically wrong. Like this is textually incorrect. God is not called Ezer Kenegdo. God is called Ezer, right? Multiple times. Ezer means helper. And it doesn't have any particular connotation of equality or superiority or inferiority. It just means that you offered help in some capacity or another. That's all Ezer means. The Kenegdo, in particular, is the aspect that is connotes the counterpart aspect of this. The specific root is negdo, which, if that were what was used, if it was ezer negdo, that would incorporate a level of absolute equality, but it doesn't. There's a kaf in the Hebrew word that precedes it, so it's kenegdo. That actually, if you look into rabbinic commentaries on this, that is a diminutive. It is a diminishing factor, so that it is not an absolute equality. It is a diminished equality. The best understanding of this phrase is actually just that she's a counterpart. In other words, Adam saw all of the animals and none of them were human beings. And so he saw Eve, and Eve was a human being like he was a human being. That's all that it's saying, right? Not just that she's a human being, but she's a human being that is the counterpart to his role, which is a male. Adam was a male, so she is a female, right? The counterpart. Which, another interesting aspect to this is a hard truth for women to hear. The Hebrew word for female is it means holes, basically. That's actually all that it means. It means holes.
wait, what's the word?
Nekeva.
Nekeva. Oh, like a kev is a oh my god, is a cave.
Yes. Yeah. That's what it means. And so this is only saying that she's a counterpart to the male humanoid. But God is never called Ezer Kenegdo. That specific pairing of words only appears twice in the whole text of Scripture, and it's in Genesis 2, and it's respective to Eve. This is the only time that those two words appear together in the entirety of Scripture. God is not called Ezer Kenegdo. God is called Ezer, and it's a huge stretch to try and compare all of the examples where God is called that to what Eve is to Adam. All right, Eve is the only person who's ever called Ezer Kenegdo, and it only means that she is a counterpart to Adam. And like I said earlier, the existence of the letter kaf in that word is a diminutive. It means she is his equal counterpart, but it's a diminished equal counterpart. So it's not an absolute equal, it is a diminished equal. It's because Adam was the one who was the leader of creation. He was the one who was given authority over creation. It's why creation wasn't cursed when Eve ate the fruit. Creation was cursed when Adam ate the fruit.
Yeah, that word "kenegdo" really sends people into a spiral. Like, there's so many different, because neged means like as an opposition. So some women take it to be like, oh, I should be oppositional because I'm kenegdo. I'm always trying to like put the like devil's advocate. And I just, after talking about it, we really came to the conclusion that women are just opposites to men. Men are strong, women are weak. Men are hard, women are soft.
Yes.
You're just his opposite. You're not
Men are
equal. And if
logical,
anything,
women
you
are
are
emotional.
polar. Like
Men have a
opposite.
phallus, women have holes.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean,
obviously,
if you want to be really, really hard literal about what that is, I mean, that's like the most extreme physical point of oppositeness that exists.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's cope, mass cope. Let's see
Exactly.
the next comment.
And if you're opposite, you can't be equal because equal means the same.
Oopsie. Oh. Here we are. 1 second. Sorry. All right.
But the real truth is too is that like women kind of use equality as like a catch-all buzz term to get whatever they want. Women actually don't want equality. They actually just want a good life, and they're just using that to accomplish whatever particular agenda they have at that time.
Mhm.
So that's the thing. So it's like women have always had a good life before equality, and equality is not necessary to have a good life. And in fact, men men are quite independent and can be like really independent and rebellious. Like they want to have this idea of freedom, like a part of their life and everything. Women actually don't have that same desire. They don't. Their desire is actually not for freedom, independence, and etc. Like the American spirit or whatever. Like sometimes they might say they do, but it's not true. Women's desire is safety, right? Even if they have no freedom at all, it's safety, it's protection at all costs,
Right.
and their desire is for protection, even if they have to sacrifice their freedom. So they don't really want independence and freedom. They want protection and provision. They're completely dependent creatures, so they don't have the same desires that men do, even though they gaslight all the time about it.
Right.
Up in here. Sorry, did you want to respond to that?
Oh, yeah. So this was an interesting one because it's talking about the curse, right? And it says it's not that she would desire to rule her husband and he's supposed to rule over her. I don't know where they're getting that because that's actually a very popular interpretation, not just in Christian circles, but also in Jewish circles. If you read rabbinic commentary on this, the your desire will be for your husband. There are multiple interpretations of that because in Judaism, there's never just one interpretation. But one of them that is very prominent is the idea that that means that her desire would be for her husband's position, right? And that instead of that, he would rule over her. Now, the trouble with the curse, because like I said earlier, a lot of women think that man's authority was only granted at the curse. That's not true. Man's ruling over women was not a subsequent result of the curse. The curse to women actually was mainly to do with childbirth. So she's not given multiple curses at once. All of this is respective to childbirth, and it has to be viewed through that lens because the way the curses work is interesting because they all have to do with the origin point of the person being cursed, right? So the ground was cursed because of Adam. Adam was taken from the ground. So the ground is cursed because of him. Okay. The woman is cursed in childbirth, which is a process where a human being is taken from another human being because Eve was taken from Adam, right? And the curse of the serpent was essentially that he was the overarching ruler over the animal kingdom of the animals. Of course, man presided over all the animals, but the serpent, so far as we could tell, was the greatest among the beasts of the earth. To the tune that it was apparently somehow capable of communication with man in a way that the other animals weren't. It walked upright in a way that the other animals didn't, and that's a miss thing. So we think of snakes and we think of the whole curse of it: you shall crawl on your belly, to be the way that a snake slithers on the ground. But in Hebrew, that's not really what that means. Any four-footed animal crawls on its belly that way. It's just to say that it doesn't walk upright. It doesn't walk upright. It walks, this way. And so the serpent, oddly enough, there's a rabbi who pointed this out. The description that we get of the serpent is actually one of the most humanoid depicted creatures, right? To the point that, so far as we can tell, it walked upright. So far as we can tell, it was capable of some form of communication, and it was highly intelligent. So the word Nachash does not directly mean snake. It is used for snake elsewhere in the scriptures, but we can't just retroactively insert that back into Genesis because the description that we get of the serpent is not that. But so all of the curses have to do with the origin point of the being that's being cursed. The idea that Eve's desire would be for her husband, but that he would rule over her, and this being respective to childbirth, um, seems to have something to do with her desire for children and the man kind of deciding whether or not that's something we're going to do right now, which of course that's something else that women have tried to usurp over men, in the point of either uh, lying to men, saying that they're not on birth control, so that they can extort a pregnancy out of him, so that they can extort childbirth, among other things. And I've known several men that this has happened to, even to the point that it not necessarily that they were on childbirth or on birth control, but that they were, rather than that, they were actually orchestrating their diet to be more conducive to conceiving without their husband's knowledge. Right? They were trying to conceive in opposition to their husband's will. And that seems to be the case, but also the idea that it is her desire for his position over her, and that he shall rule over her, is another aspect to that. And those aren't really different, because her desire for his position, which is to say her desire for when they will have children, where it's really that's his choice, right? Is part of that. The role of a husband in choosing when to have children, when not to have children, because oddly enough, children biblically are property of the husband. Okay, when the Torah says that if two men are fighting and the wife tries to help and she's pregnant and the child is injured in the process of that, it's not her that brings the charge to the court for the damages to his child, to her child. It's the husband, right? And the reason is because the child is his seed, right? It's his seed. It's not her seed. It's his seed. And we see this borne out in creation in and of itself, in the fact that when a divorce happens, the children who remain with the father end up better off. That produces a better outcome than if they stay with the mother, right? A statistic that people try to ignore a lot is that single mothers raise single mothers.
Yep, absolutely. It's it's such an abomination on every single level that our society believes that women should get automatic custody of the children, full custody, and then if the man fights hard enough, he might be able to see them for 4 hours once every 2 weeks. It's so evil. Like, number one, that's not even baseline equality, like they said it was all about. That's complete supremacy.
Yep.
So, like, equality would be, shared custody, 50-50, you trade off every week or whatever. And that's not the baseline standard, which should be. Of course, I don't believe divorce should be allowed at all, unless under extreme circumstances. But anyway, like, that would be a huge step in the right direction. If we actually had equality, it'd be a massive increase in privilege for men.
Get rid of no fault divorce.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. One note on Genesis 3:16 before we move on. I know a lot of people like to talk about it, and they always say, like, oh, maybe that means that her desire will be to control her husband. I just think that the most obvious literal interpretation of that makes the most sense. Her desire will be for her husband, and he must rule over her. Like, her desire will be for her husband. She's obsessed with having a husband, and we see that in women's nature. They're obsessed with having a husband. When they do have a husband, they obsessively want to be around him, talk to him, cuddle. Like, they can't go a day without talking to him. They get worried if they don't talk to him for a certain amount of hours, et cetera, to this day, even with all the feminism. So I think it just means what it says. I think it just means that women will have, like, because they're dependent, they'll have an obsessive desire for the man. There's such dependence, and they'll, like, just like a daughter and her dad, like, a woman will feel that way to her husband. And men love their women, but they're not quite as clingy, as women are in reverse. Almost always.
It's not obsessive.
Yeah. Right. And so they love her, they want to be around her, but it's not 24/7. It's okay if they're separated a little bit. They're a little bit more healthy about it. And so I just think it means that a woman will obsessively be clingy to her husband.
Sure.
I thought of it like constantly desire his approval. And I think that's a really important part for women, to have the the approval of their man, the tenderness, the affection of their man. And what you'll see in like the original post is when they don't have it, it's a massive cope or overcompensation. And when they feel like they don't get the approval of men, then it's an immediate reflection on themselves. And what ends up spiraling out of in women's mind is like, okay, I am therefore a failure. And I can't live with me being a failure. Therefore, I'll just point my finger at everyone else. It's everyone else's fault. It's everyone else's problem. They're the ones to blame rather than I have shortcomings. I have some shamefacedness that I need to face. And I can then get the approval of my husband, which I desire. But when they don't get it, they just all out of whack, which is why we think that women should have husbands that is a very much younger age than whatever they should be married at a much younger age than what we're seeing today. It's really damaging them in so many ways for their future husbands. It's damaging them biologically. They're just losing their mind. They're going on SSRIs because they can't handle with not having the affections of a man in their life.
Right.
Especially not a father. So.
Yep. To what you said, Joel, and I would say you're 100% right. So, Judaism is interesting in that it's got 4 main modes of interpretation, and none of them are exclusive to one another. And this is an interesting thing that people don't really understand. If you read 2 different interpretations from 2 different rabbis, they're not mutually exclusive, right? They're not exclusive to one another. It's more likely that both of those rabbis would actually agree with the other one. In that they're both true on a different level. And so the 4 modes of interpretation are Peshat, Remez, Darash, and Sod. Peshat is the literal interpretation, just the hard set, what does the black and white say? Remez is like, what is it hinting at? Darash is like, it's the comparative. It's where we get the word midrash, which is closer to like a parable. Of what it says, and then Sod is like the more spiritual take on it, and none of these are in exclusion to one another, right? If your interpretation is in exclusion to one of the other modes, then you're interpreting it wrong. So what you've just said would fall into Peshat. I mean, that's literally just what it says. Your desire will be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. I mean, it's very simple, and that is what women desire. Women desire a man who is capable of ruling over her. Right? Men desire, like we said, a man who is superior to her. Women desire a man who is going to be a leader to her. As much as they say they don't want that, that's actually what they want, which is why even their biological levels of attraction tend towards that, right? It's why they like height. It's why they like a certain physical build. It's why they like a certain, go-getter mentality among men, right? They want men who can rule over them. The problem is, they are now at a point where they're saying they want men who won't rule over them, but they still want the man who can. And that's just not how men are wired, right? If I'm capable of doing it, then I'm going to do it. That's how men are, right? I do what I'm capable of doing, because if I'm not doing what I'm capable of doing, then I'm actually wasting myself as a man. If God made me able to do X, then I need to be doing X.
The shit test.
Yeah. And the rule over, like, all women rule over all children. And we all think that's a wonderful thing now, don't we? We don't say, oh my God, the women are oppressing the children. They're just evil. That's so wrong. We need the children to be equal to the women. We need to lead a child's equality movement, a child's empowerment movement. The women are oppressive and we need these kids liberated, but that's how ridiculous the feminist movement is, so the mother, the women, as a whole, rule over the children. We all like, oh yeah, that's for their own benefit. God rules over men, and He will in a very direct way during the 1,000-year reign and the new earth. When you die, and we think that's a good thing, a wonderful thing. So men ruling over women is a good thing for their own benefit. And we can see the horrible results when they don't do that. So just just to cover that little future objection. Oh my God, rule over, that's horrible.
Right. Well, it's funny because you said, so I was involved in a conversation the other day where and it was in jest, because it wasn't adversarial at all, because all of the people involved in the conversation pretty much agreed on the same topic, but I said something, I don't remember exactly word for word what it was, but somebody summarized it. It was like, they were like, Brad, women suck. And I'm like, no. I'm not saying women suck. I'm just saying that, like, absent male supervision, they tend towards behaviors and philosophies that are self-destructive and
Yes.
destructive to broader society. Right? That's not saying women suck. That's just saying, that the
Women can't.
divine order needs to be followed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're
Yeah.
trying to imply that women can never suck.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Like if they don't suck, then they're freaking they're angels. It's like no, they can suck. And I get a lot of comments. I get a lot of comments that I have internalized misogyny and why aren't I being nice to women? I'm like, I don't owe anybody allegiance or niceties because whatever they have between their legs. Like I consider myself a pretty nice person, but if you're coming at me and you're a woman, I'm definitely going to come at you. And your vagine does not, hold any sway with me. Like
Right.
this
Well,
alliance.
Well, women since the hippies have been saying that all men suck and no one bats an eye. Yeah, the guys agree. They'll be like, yeah, you're right. We really do suck.
Honestly,
Yeah.
at this
But
point, you
if-
should just lean into it. Just be like,
Yeah.
yeah, they do.
Yeah. If a woman has a patriarchal father that controls her and arranges her with a patriarchal husband in her teens and she's a virgin, and he enforces his rule, women can be wonderful. They're wonderful in that context. A woman can be a wonderful thing, but left to their own devices, they're horrible and self-destructive, like you said. So that's
Just
absolutely correct.
Assume that women suck and take all precautions so that she sucks less, and then you'll be pleasantly surprised.
It's funny because I did an interview with a child psychologist who he was a Christian author who had a lot of prominence when I was much younger, named Dr. John Roseman, and it was an incredible interview. And at a certain point in the interview, and I think that I think the topic was the importance of fathers. I forget the exact part of the conversation that he brought this up in, but he brought up exactly how some of the circumstances we see today came to be. And he said essentially, like, this idea of men as like the great monster of history, as abusive and whatnot, that was presented, and men, for whatever reason, just accepted it. When it wasn't as widespread of a problem as it was presented. Like we get this idea that in the 50s, every husband ever was just an abusive alcoholic. And it's like, well, no, that actually is not true. It's not even half true. It actually was more fringe and more restricted than we think. It was blown grossly out of proportion. And that was his point, is that men, in spite of it being blown out of proportion, men just kind of accepted it for the sake of peace, which I think is a big problem with men, is that men want peace more than anything else, especially in their own home. And so they just accept things that they really shouldn't accept because it keeps the peace.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, that is the
100%.
problem. Yeah.
That is the problem. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Men aren't even willing to raise their voices at their wives.
Right.
She'll, you don't have to do it all the time. Big dogs don't bark, but when they do bark, that gets the message across.
So-
they don't have to do it overtly, unnecessarily, like a chihuahua, because they've gotten the message.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing too. Is like another thing that men don't understand, because women are not they're in no way, shape, or form is a woman similar to a man, other than they're human. They breathe oxygen, they drink air, they drink water. Other than that, they're completely different. So men have a tough time, especially with being lied about since birth, about how to interact with a woman when she acts this way, when she acts toxic. What are you supposed to do? So when a woman's acting toxic, the man interacts with her like he would with his mom. Oh my God, how can I appease you? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. What do I do? I'll do whatever you want. That's actually not what they want. They're testing. They're feeling insecure and weak, and they want you to be strong and put them in their place so they can feel secure. So when they get toxic, they want you to be alpha, and they want you to be a big, strong daddy, and they want you to raise their voice and demonstrate that you're the superior vessel and everything's fine, and they will not be allowed to act that way. And then they have this wonderful sense of well-being. They want you to raise your voice. They want you to put them in their place. They're not going to tell you that, because that defeats the whole purpose of you being the superior vessel, the stronger, the smarter one.
Right.
If they have to tell you how to be a man, well, I guess you're not really a man then, right? So we don't have enough men teaching other men this. Their dads don't teach them this. I know my dad didn't teach us this. And all my brothers are beta too, even though they all have a traditional like provision relationship. So it's really important for men like you and I to teach other men this, because this is a
Yes.
lost art now. Now that the oldest people in our society are the hippies that push the feminism, now no one knows it anymore. And the World War II generation they were so traumatized by the war, they're just like, let's just have a
Oh,
good time. Let's
man,
just have good times.
what you
It's
just said. So Homath did, he had an interview with some other YouTube channel where he was talking about the shared knowledge that ancient cultures used to have. Okay. So like ancient cultures have all, and I mean all, have had sayings and, proverbs of just knowledge that was to be shared with younger generations. And it involved gender dynamics and relationships and whatnot. Um, and our modern society has just gotten rid of that, and that's part of the problem. It's why men have no idea how to approach women, whereas ancient cultures really didn't have to deal with this because the knowledge. So one, I think he said, was an Egyptian saying, which is essentially, I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something to the tune of like, it doesn't matter how much you have given your wife. If she's unhappy with you, you've given her nothing. Right. And it's just like, well, yeah, I mean, that's the kind of knowledge that is how women behave. And that's how that is how men need to understand that women behave. And what we've gotten rid of is just that kind of shared knowledge. And it's not that we've gotten rid of it, it's that we've belittled it and we have kind of cast it aside. And the reason I say that is because, like, I've grown up my whole life with uh the talk about men the way that men are talked about, and I know that you were too, Joel, right? We're told how men are, we're told how women are, and it's never really been true. I was taught this idea that women are just all giving, and so if you're treating her right, then she'll only be giving, and that just leads to like simp behavior where you really never get anything back because
was being
go
sinful or bad. That's just because the man was bad and sinful first. And if the man's good and nice, and the woman will be even more good and nice, that is so not true. Yeah.
Right, and it's such a false idea because what even psychology has discerned is that, like, if you don't have expectations of women and you don't hold them accountable to a certain standard, then they just won't.
100%,
right?
Yeah.
They're content just to keep taking as much as you'll give. But so one thing that comes to mind is, like, I have grown up my whole life hearing things that divorced men have said about women, the way that women are, and it's based on their experience with their ex-wives. And all my life, that has always been treated as like, oh, he's just big mad because he's divorced and because she left him, right? He's just big angry man. It's not actually true. Here's the thing. Now that I'm old enough and I have enough experience and I can look back on my life and all of the experience that I've had with women, both platonic and in relationships, I've actually almost never been told a lie about women from a divorced man. I can look back and I can discern that everything I was ever told by a man who was divorced was actually true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Exactly. Like, men have this desire to, to represent things accurately, to find out the truth about important topics in life, and to be fair and to be good. And women do not have that same inclination at all. It's so devastating because I really wanted women to be the more the more moral gender, but they're not though. Like if you ask a divorced woman, if you ask any woman anything, they'll always say, "Oh yeah, I was 100% good. He was 100% bad." Well, like there's 0% chance that's true and accurate. So you're just a completely sexist liar, is what you are. And so like every single woman in every relationship, she says that she's 100% good. He was 100% bad. And that's how it goes every single time. Every single one. I was like, okay, we have a common thread here. We have a common trend of total narcissism.
That reminds me of that Boaz thing. Don't be a Boaz. Don't be a lame ass. Don't be all of these things. And it's just like you're describing a simp because you're blaming all of women's misbehaviors on a man's shortcomings. And like again, they have a mind. They have free will. They're choosing to be bad. They are individuals apart from the man. They have to be held to some degree of competency. I mean, like they're not walking around sucking their thumb wearing diapers. So we really despise that rhyme. Like people thought it was so clever. Don't be all of these things and then she'll be good. Well, guess what? If he's if he's a provider and a protector and he's kind and gentle and he's long suffering, she's still a biche. So it's like,
Right.
what's a
Right.
guy to do? And they whitewash the history of wisdoms and proverbs because women whitewash it because they don't want any sort of unflattering truth about themselves to be like, the men have been red pilled for all of history. All of history's proverbs throughout all cultures is red pill. They're just sharing notes, you know, like, and they don't want any of those notes to come to light, show their unflattering nature as women, but they have no qualms about a men's unflattering nature.
Well, so that's an interesting thing about the red pill community at large, broadly, is, you know, women treat this like it's a problem. Um, and all that happened, right? Because men were told that they need to talk about their feelings. First of all, men are not going to talk about their feelings with women. That's just not how we're wired. We know we're not going to get help with our problems from a woman, right? We're going to get help with our problems from a man who's been in the same scenario, or a man who's just wise enough to have avoided that scenario, right? That's where we're going to get our wisdom that will help us in life. And so men started to talk about their problems with other men. And what happened is we all realized that we've all experienced the same problems. There aren't very many. It's a very small handful of problems, but they all are to the same tune. They all have the same themes, and they all involve the same kind of women. And that's where the red pill was born. The red pill was born because of men just sharing their experiences with one another, which all of us thought, well, you know, probably all women aren't like that. I just had a very bad experience where, it was just this one individual who was just a toxic individual. And it's only through talking with one another that we've realized that, like, no, all of us can't have had that same experience with the same kind of toxic individual. Like, at some point, we have to recognize that there are an uncommon majority of these women who are behaving this way, and that's why we've all had that experience. We've all had this shared experience because we've all encountered the same kind of woman. Now, all of us aren't perfect. And I would even say, in my own past, with my own experience with, a particular covert narcissist, I didn't handle everything perfectly. But the ways that I should have handled things that would have avoided that are actually more red pill leaning ways. So the channel Psyche Depth I mentioned earlier, one of the things that he mentioned about kind of asserting your dominance and establishing how your relationship is going to go is the specific phrasing, "You can't date me if you're going to be this way," right? And it has to be that. It has to be that. It's not, well, we can't be in a relationship. It's not, I can't date you. It's, you can't date me. All right.
Yeah.
The privilege of dating me is being denied to you because you are being this way, right? And that's something that, honestly would have done me a lot of benefit at one point in my life, because I accepted a lot of behavior that I shouldn't have. And, if I'm honest, I really should have just dumped the girl a month into our relationship, but it extended for an entire year because I didn't have this knowledge at that point. And, it's one of those things where when I talk about it with other men, and they've experienced women who have treated them the same way, and I can acknowledge my own shortcomings, but my shortcomings were accepting that kind of treatment. That was my shortcoming.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I want to make sure I get this in because I, don't know how long we're going to go. We were talking about this earlier today, Leora and I, and so I wish there was more talk about the solution to this massive feminist problem that we have: female fascism today in the West, misandry. What's the solution? So for the first time in generations, men are at least complaining about online. That's a step that we hadn't even done before. So we're all complaining online. Women are being bad. Women being bad. Look how bad they're being. Making reaction videos. Oh, another one's being bad today. Oh, look, we're gonna watch another one being bad today. So we're just like making reaction videos of women being bad. That's not going to do anything. That it's good that we're bringing like building awareness, etc. But okay, so why did feminism never exist before if women are so equal? Well, that's because the patriarchal dynamic benefited women more. That's why they didn't even so there was manual labor to be done. There was wars being fought. Women are like, I'm not going to fight the wars, and I'm not going to build this house. And so they're like, oh, I want to do the easy stuff in the house. So the reason why a patriarchal dynamic always existed, traditional gender roles, is because women picked the gender roles that benefited them more, right? Which was staying in the house and doing the little stuff, the easier stuff. So women have actually had more privilege than men throughout all of history, not less. And the only reason they were able to do it today, we're on a social experiment with technology and protection. We're very fortunate to be in America with the oceans protection, but we have women are even if they don't have a husband, they're collectively protected and provided by men. So they're collectively protected with the military and with police and the court system, and they're collectively provided for by men's tax dollars through the government. So they already have the protection, the provision. So that's why they think they can gaslight and say, oh, I don't need a man. When they say that, they don't mean they don't need men. They say, oh, I don't need a specific husband. Very evil thought, a totally, completely evil thought that they have, but they're all saying this, right? They've been saying this for a long time. So, so the way that we can actually change things is that there's no unity amongst men right now. That's the problem. And that's why men want to have a wife, is because men aren't unified in any way, shape, or form. It's a huge problem, and so men aren't there for other men, when they need to be. And that's one of the traits women have, is that they can put aside their differences for a collective cause to gain individual power. They can put aside all their differences and they can just unify in this one sexist alliance, which has been feminism, right? Men have yet to do that. So with men, you have a minor disagreement on doctrine, like, oh, I can't work with this guy. He has this minor disagreement on doctrine or whatever, or he's part of another religion or blah blah blah. And so we're hurting ourselves by doing that. Because we're never going to all be on the same page on doctrine until the 1,000 year reign of the new earth, until it's forced by the Messiah and Yah himself. It's not going to happen. So we need to, and this is what all men did throughout all of history. This is what the founding fathers did. They weren't all on the same page on doctrine, but they were on the same page on patriarchy. And you don't have to be biblical to understand that patriarchy is the design. So men need to set aside all of their differences, all of the religious differences, political differences, etc., to accomplish patriarchy. And all that would have to happen is feminism is a total social construct that can only exist if men support it, if enough men support it, and through technology, through it's soft. If we didn't have the technology that we did, air conditioning and electricity and running water and all the safety of the military and police, feminism wouldn't exist. A woman would pick whatever man would take her. She needs protection now. She can't build the house or have any kind of provision. She needs to get a man now, just out of pure necessity. So what first we need to do, we need to stop talking to women altogether, because you're not going to make any progress with a woman. So it doesn't matter if you show them oh, look what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 14, 34 to 35. This is a super patriarchal verse. They're just going to dismiss you oh, no, he was just talking to that one church. It doesn't matter if you quote Ecclesiastes 7:28 and say, hey, out of 1,000 men, I've only found one good one, but out of 1,000 women, I have found 0 good women. It doesn't matter if you quote that verse. So okay, I'm just going to act like that doesn't exist. Look at Deborah; she was a boss babe, So their only goal is power and privilege at any cost. They have no goodwill or good faith on the truth of this topic whatsoever. So we need to not talk to women at all. And unfortunately, the few good women that do exist, they're sweet and they don't kind of have a warrior mentality. So they're not going to be helpful in this fight, because they just don't have the personality to fight it. And women will attack them just as much.
They're focused on taking care of their home like they should.
Yeah, exactly. They're focused on being a good woman, being sweet to their husband and helping out and taking care of their kids. Exactly. So men need to just focus on talking to other men. So unfortunately, around 2/3 of men are feminists, or they're radical feminists that are supporting this. So men actually need to go after other men. So we first need to take down other men that are actually in the way of fixing the system. Because the women are completely helpless. They're children. Women, it's not going to be. If there's a war between men and women, it's a non-starter. Obviously,
we know how that's going to go.
yeah, exactly. So the patriarchal men need to take the fight to the liberal feminist men. We need to either we need to try to convert them, or we need to shame them publicly. So we need to go after the liberal feminist men, take them down. And once we do that, like the women will follow, whatever strongest men are in charge. We're outnumbered for sure, but the feminist men are weaker though. They're totally weaker. So that's the thing, is a lot of feminist men are women, so we're stronger, etc. So we need to focus our attention on taking down the other men, and the women will follow, etc. So if it's really tough though. The men are so apathetic. What I've noticed, and I want to see if you have any ideas. Like what I've noticed is that like it's almost impossible to get a man to click on and watch a video all the way through on an important topic. It doesn't matter if it's about the Bible or if it's about gender dynamics. They just don't want to do it. They're working and they're sleeping. That takes up almost all their time. If they're married, if they have kids, they're accounted for. Now they're compromised. They're in like survival mode. They're like, I can't rock the boat because I can't afford to risk all this in family court and ruin my life and everything else. But in their free time, what they do if they get any free time at all, they're gonna like watch football or play video games, or they're just not interested because they're kind of embracing their animalistic side rather than their angelic side. What men seem to be interested in is
boobs,
naked women. Exactly. They're interested in hot naked women. They're not interested in these important, boring talks. Like that. That's why the guys are so interested in listening to. They want to hear from Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Elizabeth Beth Stuckey, Lila Rose. They want to listen to the Fox News. I watch Fox News my entire life, but not in a while. They want to listen to the freaking bimbos on Fox News. And so they
want to watch the whatever podcast.
Yeah, they want to watch
and Fit. They want to look at the hose.
The whatever podcast, exactly. And so I did an experiment here recently, and gosh, it's so frustrating me about how most people are just stupid. They don't understand the idea. So I've been posting biblical patriarchal posts for years and years and years and years, and I just can't get a lot of traction despite having 5,000 friends for this entire time. Like you post a story, I'll post a biblical story, and I'll get 10 or 20 views. And I wanted to do an experiment. I've been posting women in bikinis recently just to see the difference. 1,000 views. We were like, oh, that's juicy. I'm gonna click on that. And then they're like, hey, why'd you make me look at that? You're bad. You can't post that. And I literally said the statement. I was like, hey, I'm doing an experiment. I was like, you guys need to stop being animals. All you care about is hot naked women. You don't care about the Bible or God or patriarchy or anything important. You don't care about other men. You don't care about yourself. You don't care about your own children. And so I did that to get their attention. I told them, stop being a simp and click on the next story where it's a post about the Bible, or it's a post about patriarchy, where you can get more information on this topic. And all the guys reacted. They're like, so the guys that are guilty of the very thing that the experiment was to show, then they act like I'm the bad person for showing that they want to be an animal rather than an angel, So right. I get 1,000 guys that click on a picture of a woman in a bikini, and then they say that I'm showing nudity. It's it's like, she's in a bikini. You guys go to the pool and the beach all summer. You don't ever criticize the women out there wearing that stuff. You're not criticizing the women on your Facebook that are posting bikini pictures, but you criticize the conservative man that does it to demonstrate a point. They're like, you're not supposed to post that. How dare you post that? Men are struggling with lust, and then you just push them over the edge, So, how can we how can we get the guys to be more interested in this topic and to change this?
So, and I hate to be a little bleak about it, but my compatriot here at Alternate Media, Seamus, he introduced me to a concept that I have found to be true moving forward from the time that I was introduced to it. And it is the 80-20 ratio, which is to say that about 80% of anything that you examine is going to fall on an 80-20 divide, 80% and 20%. 80% of everybody is actually just dumb. 20% of everybody is actually they're capable of good faith behavior in society. When you go into IQ, that divide is even farther. I have one of my younger brothers once said that he thinks that the actual primary basis for honest, good faith, intellectual conversation begins at a 120 IQ. If you're anything below that, then he would call you a midwit, which is to say that you're capable of trying to sound like you're smart, but you're actually not smart. And then, obviously as you go lower, it's worse. But so 80% of everybody is dumb and 20% of everybody else is capable of at least good faith behavior in society. So I don't know that it can be fixed with the broader majority of men just on that basis. But for me, what I've found has worked with a lot of people towards at least making them comfortable with a frame that maybe they might have an aversion to in one way or another is to always present it in the form of a question, right? And particularly a question that's relevant to them, right? Ask them a question about maybe an experience they've had with a more feminist minded woman in their past, right? Have you ever experienced X or something like that? Because you're giving them the opportunity to discern, well, yes or no, I have. And for the majority of men, the answer is probably going to be yes. And that intrigues them enough to actually want to listen to what else you have to say. And then the rest of that is just dumbing it down to where the 80% can actually comprehend it. And that's like I said, it's a little bit bleak when you look at it in terms of that, but that's, I have found it to be true. Basically, everything that I examine in society today, it falls on an 80-20 divide where, 80% of everybody is supporting something that is functionally retarded. And the other 20% are able to have an actual intellectual conversation about it where they're talking about the cons and pros, the future effects of, and what have you, but beginning with a question brings people to a point where they can ask themselves, okay, does this apply to me? And I think that that's the bigger problem, is because men have believed in the feminist lie. So they right out the gate think that it doesn't apply to them because they've never met a woman like that. When they probably have, they're just not really thinking of it in the proper frame. They're not really asking the difficult questions of themselves. It's like, okay, have I ever encountered a woman who only called me when she wanted to have dinner? Like they're not thinking about it in terms like that. They think they had an actual shot with this woman at one point. They're not thinking about the fact that, like, well, no, she only ever wanted your attention when she wanted to have dinner. All right, when it was convenient to her to get a free meal.
I guess you can't assume that people are thinking. You have to drive the mechanism that will cause them to think, because people are not, a lot of people, don't have an internal monologue. They're not thinking about their thoughts. They're just kind of operating like an NPC or whatever.
Exactly. Well, yeah, NPC is correct. Yeah. Most of everybody that you encounter is an NPC. And that's just a really hard truth to accept.
100%. Just because you brought up that example, I'm just so surprised that, like, I think only about half of conservative men, so just a fourth of men, 12.5% of the population, are remotely red pilled on women in any way, shape, or form. So, but I don't know how not. Like, so with the whole dinner thing, so I went on a date in high school, and I took her out to dinner because that's what they said you were supposed to do. And she acted completely uninterested the entire date. She was looking somewhere else, and I was, trying to be charming and everything. I'm like, what is going on here? And I drove her home, and she wasn't interested at another date. And I said, Mom, like, Mom, why would she accept the date if she wasn't interested? She's like, well, a lot of moms tell their daughters that if you get asked on a date, you should just go for the free meal. Like, it's a free dinner. Like, so what's the harm in that? And he's going to feel better if you say yes to that and you say no to that. I couldn't believe it. I was so mind blown and livid. I'm like, are you serious?
Yep.
I was like, that's crazy. A man would never do that to a woman. I was like, okay, no more dinners on the first date. So I learned way back in high school in the early 2000s, you never take a woman on out to dinner on the first date, because she's just, she just wants a free meal. She's just, so it was coffees from then on out. And so I can't believe that the guys are still taking girls out to dinner. Like, to this day, a lot of them haven't figured it out, Well, and then they did, like, CNN did a poll, and they said at least 1 out of 3 women admitted, so not even ones that don't admit, to going on first dates just for a free dinner. And some woman said that she, like, didn't have to pay groceries for, like, months because she was going on dinners, like, every night. So
yeah.
So it seems like guys are they've been so feminized for so long. They're so apathetic, and lazy. It seems like they're going to let this situation continue until it collapses on itself, and then they'll do things the old-fashioned way from then on out. Like, they're going to wait for an economic collapse, or they'll wait till, like, the electrical grid goes down, maybe because of
accelerationists.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe because of an EMP attack and all the digital grid goes down, and then we're thrust into like the late 1800s again. And at that point, women will they'll want to be patriarchal because they get to do the easier roles in life.
Or the Muslims will outbreed them.
So it's crazy. Men's issues is not even a talking point amongst politics. After all of these decades, men's issues aren't even a thing. No one talks about men's issues. No one tries to appeal to men, and everyone just goes along with it, etc. I actually said on Pearl's episode, I've said this on several of the videos, so I'll just say it now. It's like, well, one way that we could try to fix it sooner, and there's plenty of people that just say, oh, that's just so unrealistic, that's never going to happen. I was like, okay, well, it's an idea of something that can happen sooner. I thought, well, we don't actually have to get the whole population to believe this. Like I said, if we just get half of conservative men, which would just be 12.5% of the population, be 41 million men. I understand it's not likely, but it's just an idea, just to throw it out there. If we could get half conservative men, just 12% of the population, it'd be 40 million men, and we could get them all to go down to DC and demand that they change the laws that would be fair, and that wouldn't be so dehumanizing and harmful to men, and to the family. If we could actually change the laws to be patriarchal again in Congress, and if they refuse to do that, then they're supposed to work for us. They're our servants. They don't rule over us. We don't live in a monarchy. And so then let's remove them from their position because they're corrupt. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to vote how we want them to vote, make laws that are for the welfare of the people, remove them from Congress, put normal people in there, not lifelong career politicians, and then pass patriarchal laws. So because I don't think it's going to happen organically, individually, here and there, et cetera. I think that it's either going to be like a disaster where it's forced upon the population, or if we want it to happen anytime soon in our lifetime, I think it'd have to be like a bigger movement like that. So I understand that that's not likely, but it's one idea. So if so people operate like on a rewards and a punishment system. So the laws right now are feminist, so people are operating according to the feminist laws, and the women are benefiting from feminism, so they're not like incentivized to change anything, etc. And the conservative men can't do anything because we're in the minority and the laws are feminist, etc. So we would have to change the laws. There would have to be serious punishments for stuff like adultery, etc. We'd have to. So anyway, what do we do away with? We do away with abortion, do away with alimony, child support. We do away with divorce, no fault divorce. There'd be serious punishments for adultery, at least jail time. I prefer the death penalty, but at least jail time, etc.
The false paternal thing.
Yeah. So what I've noticed, and so why do I say like these kind of measures, is that women won't be good unless they're forced to be good. They're not going to be good unless their dad or the husband forces them to be good. And ultimately, they're not going to be good as a whole, as a population, unless the men of the society as a whole places laws and enforces it across the board. So everyone's going to conform to their culture, no matter how bad that culture is. Like we all live in Sodom across the board. I was just talking to Lior. It's like, how there used to be 5 cities in the Dead Sea that were Sodomites. It was Sodom, it was Gomorrah, and there's 3 other ones. Well, now the whole world's Sodom. Like the whole West is Sodom now. Is like, and everyone's okay with it. So people just conform to their society. So the thing is like if you're able to create like a conservative patriarchal family, okay, well that's just you. That's just going to be you and your wife and your kids. And guess what? They're going to be born to like a completely sodomite culture, and you might lose them. Your kids could be liberal growing up, so it's still not fixing the problem. So it had to be something so more collective. But so the downside is that men are too apathetic to do that. The plus side is we don't have to get 100% of the population. We don't even have to get 55% of the population. I think if we could just get half of the conservative men, they're the ones that have the real physical strength. If we could get that many, then I think that would be enough to change things. Because when they did, like, look what women did with feminism. Like they're the weaker vessel, and they only had 4% of women only wanted the vote back in 1920. Notice they didn't get the equality of the draft. They just got the privilege of voting without the obligation. Right. So they never wanted equality. What a joke that men haven't forced women to be equal. That's another thing too. Another way we could go about it, I don't know if this would be easier or not, but we could actually force women to be actually egalitarian in equality. We could actually give women the draft, the equality of the draft, et cetera.
Or they sign off their vote.
Yeah.
They sign away their vote.
Yes.
But it might be easier to actually take feminism even farther and be like, hey, look, you said you wanted equality, so now you're getting it. You're gonna be drafted. And I know a lot of women, just out of pure fear of the possibility, might be advocating for patriarchy if we did that.
Yes.
So just some ideas I'm spitballing of how we could actually change things versus just complaining. It's like Pearl's viewership has gone way down. Like we love Pearl, big supporters of Pearl. She has 2
Right.
million
Me too.
subscribers. I feel like it's a few thousand clicks. It's because here's the reason why. It's because she and others, they're talking about the problem, but they're not talking about solutions. And she's like, look, I'm just a girl. Like, how am I supposed to solve anything? It's like, yeah, good point. But men are going to tune out if we don't start talking about solutions. For women love complaining. They get like satisfaction out of complaining, and in their brains it actually lights up equally as if they've done something if they actually just can get together and talk about a situation. But not for men. So it's got to start there for awareness, but eventually there has to be a solution that's being talked about, or men will just be like, okay, we're just talking, we're wasting time, this is actually making my life worse, not better. No one's talking about real solutions, and so we might as well just embrace this feminist system if we're not actually, if there's no idea of changing it, let alone plan.
Yeah.
Have you thought about any of these things? Any of the 2 things I've thrown out there?
I've thought about all of them, and I think they're all good ideas. One additional one that I would throw in there, and this is just, thinking as a man, the way that a man thinks about things. So men are big fans of credentials, all right, especially anything that involves any kind of, academic study and whatnot, or really even the trades. We want to know that the person who's working on whatever the problem is has credentials in it. That they have a track record of proficiency, because that's what credentials really are. So you always want to hire the best carpenter to fix whatever the problem is in your house, the best plumber, right? We want somebody who has experience in it. And experience with women is one of the only areas where men tend to downplay whatever their past is in the faith community. And I have to limit this to the faith community because the faith community is what treats that as though that is the devil itself. In men in particular, for women get the pass, and we all acknowledge that that's in their past and they're a new person now, they're a new creation, that whole thing. But like for men, we're not allowed to talk about that, especially not positively in any kind of way, because that's the devil. But when you really think about it, if I'm trying to alert other men to a problem on that front, it actually behooves me to lean into my experience and say, look, you haven't been on a date in the last 5 years. You're still a virgin. You want to tell me that I don't know about women and that's why I'm wrong in what I'm saying, right? That I'm the one who's mistaken. Like, I could have stolen your girlfriend from you 5 years ago. So men need to lean into their experience, not necessarily brag about it, because again, these are, things that were not biblical ways of living that we were doing, but it is a track record and a testament of the fact that we do understand women, right? That's why we were so successful. And men are more inclined to listen to that. That's why the one part of the red pill community that has gotten the most traction is the people like Andrew Tate, like Clavicular, like all of the men who are pickup artists, right? The men have listened to them because those men have demonstrated that they understand how women behave to the point that they're able to exploit it for unbiblical behavior. So like those of us who do have that kind of background, you do need to kind of lean into that and just demonstrate it. Just lay it out. Just say, look, man, I know how they work. I know how they operate. I know how they think. Here's why. I was able to accomplish X, Y, and Z in my younger life. Like I was able to be the ladies' man. I was able to be the guy who could have stole your girl. Like, that's what I am. You are not that. So you're not qualified to tell me that I'm wrong about women at this point. That men are inclined to listen to that. And I think that that's something that could be benefited from.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've been debating that very idea since we started our channel 4.5 years ago, and I was on well, let's be on the more cautious, less information the better. Let's make it polish it up. So I haven't actually delved in. I've alluded to it, but I haven't delved into it at all. Because the oh my gosh, the culture that I was raised in, the worst sin to my mom was premarital sex and fornication. You
Right.
Fornicate one time, you're going to hell. But nowadays, if you're a woman, you can be a porn star and just come to the church and you're the best success story. We're going to give you all the fame and money, and we're gonna say, yay, your sins are you're the same thing as a virgin. Your sins are washed clean. Because you believe in Jesus now. So it's a total double standard. And So and I was thinking, I was like, that's it might get really distasteful if I start talking about like all of my dating experiences, etc. And and we've actually because the guys don't have enough experience with women, and they're taught the wrong thing. Like I was taught from my parents, oh, you just want to find a nice girl at church, and then all your problems are solved. You know, that's what you do. You find a girl. Find a good girl at church and everything's fine. My last two relationships, they were my last two very long relationships. They both were church going girls their entire life, and it was so disastrous. It was like something out of a horror movie. It's just crazy. And maybe another video I'll dig into some details on that. But in the video game, so first we made a video dating, and we taught, hey, here's why dating doesn't work. Here's why it's unsustainable. Like your goals are the opposite. And you know what they did throughout all of history was arranged marriages for this very reason. It actually gives both parties, especially women, what they want immediately early on. And it solves all of these gray areas. And it solves everything that people are complaining about now actually could be solved by that. You're never going to solve everything that both parties are complaining about with dating. It's just going to make it worse and worse to where people aren't going to get together at all. And then I think like a year or so after that, we made a video game. They're like, well, this is nice. This is good for our kids. You know, the earliest people that could have practiced arranged marriage would be Generation A1 because, you know, they're young, but no one that's old enough, you know, Gen Z and above can do arranged marriages. So then we made a video called Dating. And so I played, I described how you can have success with women actually from, you know, the first message and all the way through marriage, but like, especially those early phases of messaging and talking and going on a date and, you know, how do you handle that and et cetera. And so I went into a lot more nitty gritty there. That would be like very, you know, beta church approved. But I didn't talk about much about my experience though, but I did actually, a lot of guys that don't have experience, they're like, hey, you know what? I just think that Yah is just going to supernaturally provide me a woman, or I'm going to find one at a Torah church. I know exactly. Facepalm, right? You're like, oh God, that is not how it works. It doesn't say that anywhere in scripture. He clearly doesn't do that. You're old. You still don't have a wife. If that was the case, he would have given you one a long time ago in your teens or your 20s. He didn't do that. That's clearly not a thing. You know, he gives us free will. We can choose to live a good life or a bad life, you know, and so that video on game was to talk about that, and so and then they look at Lior now and they're like, oh my God, you know, I just hope I get lucky enough to find a girl like Lior. You know, you must have found her at a Torah church and she was perfect. She was a virgin. It was just so, you know, you just got lucky, and I hope I get lucky like that. I was like, that is not how it happened, people.
Right.
We made so many videos on this. We made a video called first it was where can you find a good woman. We changed it to you have to make a good woman. So we made multiple videos on this as like, you are not going to find a good woman anywhere, not at church, not overseas. You are going to take a woman that is bad and you are going to make her into a good woman, or you're not going to have one. That's how it works. You know, and the reason I kept dating, we got married when I was in my early 30s. But the reason why I kept dating is because I kept following this false advice of, you're just going to find a good woman. You're just going to find a good woman at church. God's just going to give you one. You're going to find one. And after I dated a ridiculous amount of women, I'm like, wait a second, this isn't true. I was like, everyone's an idiot. Everyone's lying. This is crap. You know, I was like, I'm going to have to make her a good woman or I will not have a good woman. You know, so Lior was a typical woman, just like you'd see out and about, like, you know, et cetera. And I taught her early on how to be a good woman, and she's a good woman to this day. But it's only because I taught her and only because I enforced it. She doesn't have a perfect past at all. But I had a great experience with Lior, even though she was raised to be a Democrat. She was raised to be an atheist. She actually chose New Age instead. So she wasn't politically or religiously aligned with me at all. And I started talking to her about these issues, you know, even though her parents are Jewish, she was raised to be Jewish, but they raised her to be an atheist, you know, go figure.
Right.
So I started talking to her about politics and about religion and about patriarchy right away. And she loved it. She responded to it well. She was like, whoa, this is a guy that's smart and strong and actually knows stuff. This is great, you know.
Go figure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually hadn't done that before because we're always taught, oh, you don't want to talk about politics or religion on the first date. You don't want to be too controversial. Don't bring that up. You're like,
this is a waste of time.
It was like,
let's get to the good stuff.
If you're just looking to hook up or have a fling, I guess you don't bring that up or it doesn't matter. But if you're looking to get married, then it really matters. It matters the most.
What's your favorite color?
Yeah, and so yeah, I remember Pearl. I remember like I remember like yeah, 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 exactly. What's your zodiac sign? Girls are the smarter but logical gender. So and Pearl actually asked me. I said I dated a lot. Pearl asked me like what my body count was, and I didn't answer it. But the point is my body count is higher than Leor's. It's significantly higher than Leor's. But so I've always decided not to say it, but. And I just thought that in the early days, I thought that like might hurt because like kind of the culture that I was raised in, they're like, oh, well, even the guys are supposed to be virgins. Come to find out, okay, virginity is just for the women, it's not for the men. But of course, most of the men would have been virgins anyway. They've been arranged marriage in their teens,
Yes.
so in so facto they would be virgins too. But virginity is specifically applies to the woman. But yeah, actually, maybe it's actually been like a harmful, like less relatable thing. Maybe I actually should have talked more about that, especially with the people that aren't on our community that aren't as cringe, and they want to hear like more specific details. They're like, well, this guy isn't opening up about his life, so there's no real point to listen. Right? Maybe that'd be better actually from now on. Go that route.
You've touched on something that I despise purity culture. That's not to say that purity is not a good thing. I'm not saying that at all. I agree. The most ideal circumstance is when both are virgins. Sure. But purity culture in particular did an extreme harm to the faith community of young people because of one thing that you just mentioned. So, yeah, my body count is astronomically higher than my wife's. My wife was a virgin when we got married. That's kind of the point that I'm driving at, is that the expectation of virginity on the part of the male is learned behavior. Women don't actually care about that organically. They may not be fans of it, but they are not as averse to it as men are, and there are biological reasons for that, among other things.
In fact, it's the opposite too. Like if you're a virgin, women are going to be turned off. They're like, "Ew, no one wants this guy." So I
exactly.
Actually, maybe if it's ridiculously high, like they may not want it to be 1,000, but if it's a decent number, they're gonna be like, whoa, this guy's desirable. He's attractive. All these other women want him. Wow, so I should too. It makes you more desirable, not less. So all of these like Christian tour guys, like touting their virginity, they think it's like a turn on. It's actually a complete turn off to women.
Right.
all you're making yourself is unmarriageable by doing that.
I've run an experiment, kind of very, very sparse over the past several years. I would like to do an actual legitimate controlled experiment with a controlled group of several thousand women. I would love to be able to run this experiment, but I've asked a question multiple times because purity culture has facilitated the circumstances in which this is a legitimate conundrum that they may face. The question that I've asked is, okay, would you rather marry a man who is a virgin but has a porn problem? Okay. Or would you rather marry a man who is not a virgin, right? Maybe has a pretty cavalier past, but has no porn problem? Which would you prefer to marry?
100% number two. Yeah.
It's always number two. It's always number two. Right. And obviously so. We don't really even need to have a deep conversation about why that is. It's pretty obvious why that is. But the people say that that's a false dichotomy. Well, it's really not, because purity culture has facilitated that reality. I've grown up in the church. I've been around other believers for a long time. And all of the men that I have known that don't have a porn problem are all of the men who had a fair amount of experience before getting married. And all of the men that I know who do have a porn problem or have struggled with a porn problem, maybe they've come over it. And I need to qualify porn problem. I don't mean they've watched porn a couple of times in their life. I mean, it's a legitimate addiction for them. All of those men were the ones who subscribed to purity culture. They got married as virgins. And that's part of purity culture. Is this really? I would say that it's twofold. It's number one, that they thought that they were too good to engage in the sinful behavior of all of the other people, but also that they're actually just too scared of women to know what to do with a naked one if it was presented to them. So it's both of those in tandem with one another. They wouldn't know what to do with a naked woman in front of them, even if they had that circumstance happen. But they also, their pride is so much that they think that they're too good to just engage in that behavior. And I'm not saying that people should. I'm just saying that's not a point of pride to like make your entire identity based around, especially if the reality is that like that combination is going to lead to you looking at porn because you're justifying it to yourself, saying, well, it's not the same thing as sleeping with an actual woman. And that's the justification that they give themselves. But that's the problem that they get is they end up with a porn addiction. And it's a problem in their marriage later in life. And this is something that purity culture has facilitated. Whereas, like, that's not something that I ever had a problem with because, like, I had experience. And I would always prefer, like, the real thing as opposed to some video that's in front of me. I would have always preferred that. And so, like, it just never appealed to me because, like, I was always capable of going out and getting the real thing if I wanted it. It never made sense to me to make such a big deal out of that if that's the kind of justification that men give themselves. And then it ends up being a problem for them later in marriage to where most of their wives would probably say, look, I would have rather you have been with 2 or 3 women before we got married, as long as this wasn't going to be a problem. And maybe I'm wrong for that, but my experience has told me I'm not.
We touched on that topic. Maybe we'll make a whole video on it. We touched on it in dating and then also in Toward Women It's Exposed and maybe in game as well of that exact idea. Like actually the social construct of dating actually led to all of this. And
Yes.
not to go on a big rabbit trail, so I'll just make it brief. And then just to briefly talk about it is and then on that topic, don't you love it? Just the misandry is like the men who watch porn are the devil, right? Like they get demonized the most. It's the men who watch porn as a masturbation. Right. Oh, they're so evil. There's nothing more evil than a guy who's seen porn before. But then all the women participating in it, sure, like usually it's a male producer, he's bad, and there's a handful of male actors, they're bad. But there's way more female porn actresses than men. There's thousands and thousands and thousands. There's probably a million or more, millions. But the women who are actually creating the porn that are online prostitutes are never demonized by these same women or by these beta males. I was like, wait a second. The people that are doing it, it's fine. They're just lost. They don't know what they're doing. They get out. But then the guys watching it for free, they're the ones that we need to demonize, and we're gonna be able to stop them like tens of millions or men, 100 million men, a billion men. We're gonna stop billions of men from watching. It's like if it's available, men are gonna watch it. A case closed. It's like giving free money to women. If a man is going to give free money to a woman, exactly. Like if a man's going to give free money to a woman, a stranger, she's going to take it every single time. She's never turning it down. So porn for men is like giving free money to women. They're going to take it. Do you blame the woman for accepting the free money, or do you blame the guy for being a retard and giving a woman free money? You say don't give her money. Of course she's going to take it. So ultimately guys are going to watch porn as long as it's available. Women watch porn too, and a lot of porn that they watch, they don't call it porn, but it is porn. Like literotica, that's porn in written form. That is porn, And we don't demonize their sex toys, and the list goes on and on and on and on.
You can buy that in Books A Million.
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah, I actually used to work for them back in the day. So it's the biggest. It's the biggest. Row in the bookstore. It falls under romance. It's female porn, But anyway, but regardless, sure, So yeah, I'm against let's outlaw that whole industry. Let's go after the producers and shut the whole thing down. But why is there no hate for all the female actresses that are producing the porn? There's no. It's just pure sexism. It's the male sex drive is demonized and the women's sex drive is glorified. They're, like Pearl's covering like a lot. There's literally a porn star to pastor pipeline, and it's fantastic. So it's the women who had sex with 3,000 guys online for everyone to see forever. That's actually okay because they were just lost and now they're found, and it's just wonderful prodigal son situation. But the guys that, oh my gosh, but even sometimes those particular actresses, like the porn stars, they blame their viewers. Oh, but the guy's watching them one time and masturbating over it. Oh, that's unforgivable. Let's just chop their head off. It's totally unforgivable. It's completely hypocritical. Like, but the easiest way to solve that whole problem would be to like shut down the whole industry. Don't let the producers produce it in the first place. So it really should be like a top-down blame rather than a bottom-up blame. Exactly. So like the women, they're going to take advantage of all the feminist privileges and evil privileges and powers they have available as long as it's available. And then they'll always counter with, well, why do the men allow this? The men don't have to allow this. Why are they allowing it? So it's really the men's fault for allowing us to be evil. That literally is the take every single time. And you're like, okay, well, it doesn't excuse you for being evil, but I agree. The men shouldn't allow you to be evil either. So men are benevolent to a fault. That's the problem, is men are too benevolent. And they actually want to believe in an idealized version of women, a fantasy version of women, rather than how women really are. So one point I want to convey, and hopefully I've conveyed in my other videos, is that they always tell guys that it's a good thing to like the girl. You want to just show how much you like her. You want to be such a simp. Just say how amazing she is and how much you like her. Blah 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 blah. And if you're so charming and romantic, and if you just like her enough, you're a good enough simp, then she's gonna like you more. No, she's not. She's not gonna like you at all if you that. So the thing is I like Leor. She's my favorite person in the world. But but actually it only works. The only way that you can have a healthy relationship with a woman and her actually like you is if she likes you more than you like her.
Yes.
And whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. You have to act like that and pretend that way. The woman wants to like the guy more than him, because if the man likes her more than she likes him, she's gonna be like, oh, I'm not with the right guy. Like, what? He's the superior vessel. I should be. If he likes me and I'm just like a bad person and incompetent, like, oh, I must be with a lowly guy. I want to go with a guy that doesn't like me as much because that's more attractive to me. So the female psychology is completely counter psychology. Everything's backwards in female world. So, but that's what Republicans and Christians and Torah folks keep telling the guys. Oh, you just want to like the guy. You want to like the girl. Be a virgin. Don't ever express your sexuality. If you're actually not like sexually forward, the woman is going to be turned off. She's not going to like you. That's one of the things I had to learn in high school. Is I was like I had hair back then. I was a total little Chad. But I wasn't. My mom was a bit controlling. It didn't have as much success as I would like to have. But I was wondering why all these girls liked me, but it wasn't really leading anywhere. And I didn't realize till like a ton of try, fail, and adjust that the women wanted to engage in affection with you, but they weren't going to tell you that. They weren't going to go halfway. Like, they wanted you to initiate everything. Like, they wanted to be kissed, but they wanted you to do that of your own initiative.
Right.
And if you didn't do that, they're going to be like, oh, there was no chemistry. He's like my brother. I guess we don't have any chemistry. He's not the right guy for me. I'm totally turned off. I'm going to go for someone else. Like, so they're waiting for guys to initiate upon them. Like, women are the passive gender, and they want the man to be to take initiative and to be confident, and they would so much rather the guy be like they don't want the guy to be a total asshole, but they'd rather be the guy to be slightly rude. They want him to be aloof and standoffish rather than too simpy, rather than too cheesy and too simpy. That's true. It's better to be slightly rude to women than to be too gushy and simpy. They say they want that. It's so funny. We just saw a girl in a reaction video, and they're reading books like, what was it? Like Heathcliff, Wuthering Heights. Yeah. A movie just came out about it, female porn. And they're like, and the girls are like, oh my God, we love this female porn. I mean, romance book. And he's yearning after her. We want you to yearn. We keep telling you, we want you to yearn for us. Yearn. It's every guy that for a woman will get rejected. She'll be turned off. Don't you dare yearn for a woman. Like, the woman wants to yearn for you. Yeah, they like reading about it in their porn, but that's not what they respond to in real life. This is why it's so tricky for nice, normal guys to have success with women. And this is why dating just doesn't work. Because it's just a free-for-all. It's sexual anarchy. Like, it just can't work. The goals are just totally opposite. And without arranged marriages, you're just going to have these situationships that no one's getting what they want out of it, and the goals are totally different, and it's just going to lead to a situation where both genders end up hating each other like they do today, and then they don't get married or stay married altogether. you know. But yeah, so all the advice you're hearing from the majority, from women for sure, and then from the other half of men, is just totally wrong. You know, all the things that the girls say they want the guys to do for them, actually the girls want to do that stuff for the guy, as far as like the pining and etc. You know.
Yep. You brought up something, and this is something we could have a whole other conversation on. Just how, you know, male sexuality is demonized, and I've said this multiple times in the past, is that essentially feminism is really just the demonizing and stigmatization of male sexuality. That you can really just sum it up in that, and that is a lot of the vitriol against porn that you hear from Christian moms. I'm not saying that porn is not a bad thing. It certainly is a bad thing. It's not healthy for men. It's not healthy for relationships. I 100% agree with that. But a lot of the vitriol that Christian moms and wives have for porn comes specifically from a place of prudishness, for the most part, where they're actually just demonizing perfectly normal sexual desires that men have. And they say that, well, men wouldn't want that if they didn't learn it from porn first. And it's like, well, we read about this from the Song of Solomon. Like, you know, like this is much older than porn. And it's perfectly normal for men to like these things, right? This is just male sexuality. That's just how male sexuality works. And your reason for opposing it, for the most part, actually comes from a feminist place of pride, right? One of the big no-nos that I hear a lot from Christian moms is against fellatio. That's like the most PG way that I can, you know, phrase that. And it's because it's degrading to women. And it's just like, well, if you think it's degrading, it's because you think that you're somehow above it, right? You think you're too good for that. But if that's what your husband likes, then you should be willing to do that for him. You know, it's one of the, that's male sexuality. Men didn't learn that from porn. I can literally cite an example from the Song of Solomon that describes it, and it's pretty obvious when you read it. It's described a little more flowery, and it's much more PG, but like it describes it, and most people upon reading it would not dispute that that's what it's describing. So, you know, it's one of those things where like a lot of even the vitriol against porn that we get is from a more feminist perspective, which is why I think that that's a conversation that needs to be had. The porn conversation needs to be had. It's much more complex than it has been represented in Christianity for the last, 30 to 50 years. The porn problem is a symptom of a larger problem. And that larger problem is just the base sexual dynamics between men and women in Christian marriages. Like that's the reality, is like there's a sexual chemistry problem, or there's a sexual preference problem, or there's a pride issue that's going into the marriage. That is the reason that women are blaming men for watching porn. Like if I like a ribeye steak and my wife refuses to like cook me a ribeye steak ever at all at any point, at a certain point, it may be not right or correct, but it's understandable that a man would go to Texas Steakhouse for a ribeye steak.
Men will have their need met one way or another. I mean, you can prefer they watch it for free, or they're going to have a brothel. Out west, in the pioneer culture, they actually legalized brothels because it fulfilled a function. They didn't have enough cities and villages or families for it to be a disruptor, and the men needed a way to blow off their steam to get the affections of a woman. And we were just in Italy, Pompeii. It was practiced, not endorsing it, but this is a biological reality. And, you know, you can ask, women would rather their guy watch a video than go out and philander around town. So it's just it's really a moot issue. It's kind of unless you're arranging a marriage for your son at a young age, STFU, like you really have nothing to say. He doesn't have a wife to express this with. So either he's going to do it at college, or if he didn't want to look at naked women, then you'd say you have a problem. Then what's the problem? He wants to look at naked women, or he doesn't want to look at naked women. You know, if he didn't want to look at naked women, tell us he was gay or something's wrong with him. So there's just no pleasing women, and that's why they should just kind of be tuned out, and guys should be listening to guys about this issue.
Yeah.
I've heard women discuss this before, where, you know, that's their complaint, is he's watching these kind of videos. And I'm like, well, are you willing to do that for him? And they're like, well, absolutely not. I'm like, then why are you mad?
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. He's doing you a favor. He's letting you be lazy and have to do one less chore. Yeah, I was just thinking the real issue. It's not about the porn. That's the thing. It's not about porn or the porn industry. What this is about is it's about women's control. Like they want to control men, and they don't actually have anything that men want except for orgasms. So they want to control men's orgasms, and then therefore the men have to submit to them, and then they can make the men be their little slaves and do whatever they want. That's what this is about. So because it doesn't matter if porn doesn't exist. Like men are going to have an orgasm, and they're going to either have an orgasm with a woman or they're going to have an orgasm with themselves, but they're going to have one, and they're going to have one as soon as they start through puberty. So just as an example,
Right.
I don't think I've ever talked about this on camera before, but we've been meaning to. So I actually didn't see porn until I was 18, but I accidentally discovered masturbation at 11, and I masturbated from 11 to 17, and there was no porn. And the thing is too, so like men are going to masturbate, they're going to have an orgasm regardless. And so what it is the women they're covetous, they're jealous, they're insecure. They're like, oh my gosh, do you think that one's prettier than me? And so they're super possessive. They're actually like even more possessive in some ways than men are. And but again, it's more about the controlling factor. If they can't control, if they can't control. And if a man can have an orgasm, he's relieved. And if he can only get it from the woman, and the woman's like, oh, really, you want something from me? So they can be manipulative with that tactic. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to give you that unless you give me this. And so that's the real, that is 100% the real motivation for why women demonize like the male sex drive and male orgasms, because it doesn't give them a way to control the man. If he can get his orgasms from himself, then how are they going to control them to do whatever they want? You got to do this. You got to do this project around the house for me, or you got to believe what I believe, or you got to do what I say. You got to do this, or you got to do that. And it's so evil. Like sex and orgasms is free. It's one of the most wonderful things that God created. You can enjoy life even if you're poor. It bonds the couple in a way that you can't bond with anyone else. And women have used it as a manipulation, blackmail tactic to get whatever sinful, evil thing they wanted and to be in control of the relationship.
I watched recently the movie The Testament of Anne Lee, because it's a period colonial piece. Yep. And it's about the shaking Quakers, right? Early colonialist, charismatic Christianity. Really, that's the best way to explain it. And it's funny because this Anne Lee figure, as soon as she became like the leader of a movement, one of the first things she did was restrict a man's access to sex, right? And that's just part and parcel to the way that history has worked. And you can observe this in history. When women get in power, the first thing they do is restrict a man's access to sex because it is a control measure.
Yeah.
It's not just that they demonize porn; they demonize masturbation. That's really the crux of it. They will go to like extreme measures to just demonize a man's nature. It is a part of his nature, and they hate it, and it doesn't make any sense. And I feel bad for those guys, married to women like that.
And you never hear them demonize it the other way around too. Like you never hear them demonize sex toys, literotica. They do watch porn online nowadays, visually, etc. They lust after Chippendale celebrities. Like a lot of the romance movies are female porn, softcore porn, sex scenes. They love it. Women get the same kind of gratification out of watching like a romance movie that a guy would out of porn. It turns them on. So girls do like sex. They just like it in a different way than guys do. They like to read it. They like to close their eyes and think about it. They like the touch more than the visual. And if they do see it, they like to see a more like softcore version, but still seeing it softcore versus hardcore rather than seeing everything. And so that is porn for women. Chick flicks are porn. There's all kinds of sex in chick flicks, and they love watching. I remember a girl in college said, "Hey, the sex scene from The Notebook's on. Do you want to come up and watch it? Should I save it for you?" And we were on a date at the time, and so she said, "Oh, I'm on a date. You can go in and watch it by yourself." So and that's porn for girls, like the sex scenes in The Notebook, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, exactly. But guys are so kind of.
And they watch it in groups, like that's just.
That's a really weird thing because like men are definitely not doing that.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, exactly. Girls are like really collective like that with sleepovers and stuff. It's just guys are really naive to women, and they're constantly lying to you about women. They're like, oh, girls don't think about sex. They don't like porn at all. They're always against it. Girls don't masturbate. Like, so female masturbation is not demonized at all. And when we talk about homosexuality, it's actually, the the thing that gets all the attention is the guys, because it just seems more like abominable, more unnatural, because one of the guys is like taking the woman's role, but homosexuality is more common amongst women, and we don't hear them demonized at all about it. So we know, like, not like starting in high school, we know that girls masturbate too, but we don't hear them demonized from that at all. The old creepy lady Sue. I remember. I wonder. You probably remember, Bradley. I think there was this old grandma named Sue that was late at night was like demonstrating like sex toys, etc., dildos and vibrators. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, actually.
She came on at like 12 o'clock when all the kids went to bed, and if I was up late watching TV, I might see it or whatever. That was just on mainstream cable television. There was nothing like that for men the other way around. So,
right.
so like you said, this is just a way to like castrate men, make them impotent, to take away their authority, so that women can have control and authority over. Like, women are so power hungry. That's what it is. They're so lustful for power. They just want to practice power over the men. Every woman's like fantasy is that they just want to be a queen, and they want the men to be their slaves. And then if they want to make all men their slaves, they at least want their husband to be their slave. They want to be a queen and have all the men be slaves and order them around all the time. They don't want to have to do anything. That's a woman's like ideal version of the world. So that's really the motivation behind all of this, and that's what they're thinking. All of their talking points are just trying to achieve that like end goal.
Right.
So
I gotta say, on Valentine's Day, it's like I don't even go on Facebook anymore. I mean, I do, but I don't, because it's just so cringe. It's so painfully cringe on Facebook. It's like these guys just go from their house to their church and to their wife, and it's just a circle of femininity nonstop. I go on Facebook, Valentine's Day, I love my girl. Mother's Day, I love my girl. It's just a nonstop female celebration. And Valentine's Day on X is just like, yeah, to heck with this. Every holiday we're simping to women. I'm done with this. Mother's Day, Valentine's Day,
Right. Nobody knows about March 14th. Right. And Father's Day gets absolutely no attention the same way. But yeah, March 14th is like the men's Valentine's Day that, like
Valentine's is supposed to be for your lover. It's exclusively gynocentric. It's just for the women. Like, I don't see women saying, I'm so glad. Like, of course I see it, but not nearly in the ratio. So it's just on X, they're a lot more black pilled or red pilled or whatever you want to say. And so Facebook, I mean, I just recommend people at least balance between the two, because Facebook is definitely, I don't know how much of the internet is the real world, but Facebook is definitely not what.
Defer to the 80-20 split.
Yeah, 80.
Absolutely. No, I definitely think everything we've discussed tonight so far is a pertinent topic and needs to be brought to the forefront of society. We need to work better about making society aware, not just speaking to just the women, but like you've said, like the men are really the ones that need to be reached, because they're the ones who have the ability to affect change. And I think we've talked around some decent avenues of pursuing that. It's just, we're probably not going to see the benefits of that in our lifetime. We're at the point where we are laying the groundwork for what could be a better future.
Right. Well, at least with the arranged marriage topic, that couldn't even begin to happen until Gen A1 is the youngest. They're between like 0 and 14 right now. So at the very spanking earliest, things could improve with them. But
thank you for bringing this to our attention, and sharing this with us. I wasn't even allowed into the group ultimately. I don't know if I'm flagged. I know I've been
That's
flagged.
Ridiculous.
I know I've been like, pushed out of some groups because I've called some popular men feminists and they didn't like that. So that's actually a common, like, there are a lot of messianic groups that actually are just purely feminist. So this is just another one of those. So thanks for bringing it to our attention. It's just, guys need to be aware. It's just a tactic. Don't get swallowed up in it and all of these semantical things. Oh, but what did the Hebrew and what does this say? This is a strategy that women use. Yeah. And you don't even have to be biblical to observe the creation that Yah made. Right. You don't have to get into the definitions and then like, do women not know what synonyms mean? It's just a waste of time that they're exhausting you. Like, get something better to do with your life, woman, lady. Like, get a husband, serve a man, and then you won't have to be online like chronically discussing what Ezer Kenegdo means. You can just be what you're designed to be. So thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Some of the
Absolutely.
About this.
Yeah, so some of the individual things we do, because obviously that collective DC plan is going to be tricky. That might take a while or never come to fruition. We just say do what you can individually. Like on every video, we say preferably go MGTOW. It's just not safe to get married and have a kid under these particular conditions that totally favor the woman and harm the man. So that's men going their own way. So boycott women in every aspect that you can. So like women thrive on male attention. They need men's protection and provision. So boycott them. And then if that's by far the easiest thing to do with the Gen Z that are, they're raised to be beta, they're incels, and they just can't bring themselves to go through that very difficult process of being a Chad. And it's really tough and not worth it. And I chose like the Chad route and like just mixed feelings on it. Really tough, and ultimately, doesn't really give you the benefits that you want anyway. So MGTOW for every man specifically. If you can't live without a woman, which I decided I'd give it one more try, then we give tips on how to be a stronger man, like in our videos. And like another thing too, we just put out a video about not tipping. Like preferably don't go to restaurants unless you're traveling, and don't tip, and definitely don't tip if it's a female waitress. So we haven't been tipping for a while, for like a year and a half, because that supports feminism right there. And guys need to be like a whole lot more sexist. Women are entirely sexist. Men need to be much more sexist in turn. If you own a business, don't hire women. Et cetera, et cetera.
Remove the women from your Facebook friend, unless you're, and if she wants to, vet her. If you're not married, vet her for a wife. I mean, we're obviously Facebook friends, but that's because you're familiar with my husband and we're all friends, and it's kumbaya. But like, if she is a single woman seeking attention, like these women don't feel the need to get a husband because they're getting all you guys' attention from them. So they don't have to do anything wife-like in order to earn that attention. So remove the women from your Facebook unless you are specifically vetting her. Take her through the vetting process. If she's not willing to be purified, move on, and don't reward her anymore with your attention. Your attention is a reward. So,
the message from women is totally clear. Women are entirely sexist. Women's message is, we hate you men. We want to dominate you and want you to be our slaves. We have a war against you, and you submit, or else we'll terrorize you. Like, men need to be just as strong and sexist in return. If men haven't fought back, that's why women have been winning. The day that men start fighting back is the day that we win. Men haven't fought back at all.
I always say women started the gender war, and the men will end it.
Right. Yeah. And because I don't even know that I would say that it's being sexist. It's just being the man that God created you to be, right?
Have some self-respect.
It's come to the point where, when people say, well, like, you're a male chauvinist, and I'm like, so like, explain to me why that's wrong. First of all, rationalize why that's wrong for me.
Yeah, exactly. These were made up terms that only got invented like in the 60s. And it was described something that was perfectly normal and good and fair as something bad. They're just made up terms. Like the term sexist, misogynist, chauvinist didn't exist before the 60s. Totally made up. So for like a political agenda. Yep. It was a way to disempower men and not to advocate for themselves, or to not fight back when women are attacking them. So.
Right. Yeah. Well,
we can do this sometime on whatever topic we want. I think we kind of hit this one on the head, but any number of topics. Tell our viewers where they can find you again, please.
Oh, yeah. Altarnatemedia.com is our website. We've got multiple articles and whatnot on there. Not particularly on this issue. We tend to stay more in the theological realm of things, although there's majority agreement among all of us who work there on this topic. This is just... it's not a very popular topic to talk about. And I think that I might be one of the only ones who's as vocal about it as I am. So alternatemedia.com. I'm also on TikTok. Alternate Media Brad is somewhere where you can find me. And I have talked about this topic on my personal TikTok. And we're also on YouTube. So you can look up Alternate Media. It's spelled ALTARNATE Media. Altar, kind of an allusion to the altar in the temple. That's why we spell it that way. That's where you can find me. Thank you so much for having me on to discuss this topic. I definitely think it's an important one, and I think that we've all discussed some really relevant points that I hope will have an effect.
Hear, hear.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for suggesting it, Brad. It was a great collab.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.